Good afternoon. Or if you all remain seated at this point of time, and there's a little bit of housework to be done before then. We might just turn down the mic a little bit, please, if we can. So declaring the meeting open, and this is going to be the last time that I read this printed sheet, though I'm handing it over next time to the General Manager. This meeting is recorded and live streamed for public viewing via the internet in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice, with the recording stored and made available to the public for later viewing. The recording is subject to copyright. Members of the public attending or speaking at this meeting will be recorded and publicly broadcast. By attending this meeting, you voluntarily consent to your attendance and participation being recorded. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed session will not be live streamed. Council requests that everyone present is respectful and uses appropriate language. Council does not accept liability for any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Please ensure that all electronic devices, including mobile phones, are switched to silent. Under the Code of Meeting Practice, public recording of this meeting is prohibited without prior authorisation by Council. Council's live streaming of meetings via Facebook is designed to encourage constructive dialogue. We remind users to be digitally responsible and respect their fellow posters. We ask users to keep comments relevant and not to spam or post personal or commercially sensitive information. This includes content that may be defamatory, derogatory, offensive or discriminatory towards council employees, councillors, other persons or organisations. Failure to follow Facebook's house rules will result in comments either being deleted, and if this behaviour persists, the user to be blocked. Can I ask you now to be all upstanding? And the opening prayer, Welcome to Country by Councillor Ken Halstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respect to elders, both past and present. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll ask the meeting to be opened in prayer by Reverend Richard Mills from the Mittagong Anglican Church, who I understand this will be your last attendance to these chambers.
Yes, I want to say a couple of things before I pray, if that's all right. Firstly, I spent time with Councillor Graham Andrews yesterday. He's a member of our church at Mittagong and he's recovering slowly from the serious operation with which he underwent last week. So I'll be praying today for his continued recovery. Also, as just was said, on a personal note, it's been my last time opening the council meeting in prayer. I'm moving to Denham Court Anglican Church, so next year I'll be living in the Liverpool Council area. However, I'll be keeping a house in Mittagong, so I'll continue to be a ratepayer and will thus watch the affairs of council with interest. I've been coming to these meetings about 3 or 4 times a year for the last 15 years that I've been the minister at Mittagong Anglican Church. So I reckon I've said the prayers about 40 times over the years. Thank you for the privilege of being involved. So today I'm going to pray for the council meeting, also pray for Graham. Then I'll use a prayer written by Anglican Archbishop of Sydney, Glenn Davies, about the bushfires. So let us pray. Almighty God, we pray for your blessing on the council meeting today. Guide and direct its work and help the councillors to make wise decisions for the benefit of the whole local community. We also pray that you continue to place your healing hand on Graham Andrews and help him to make a full recovery from his operation. Our Heavenly Father, creator of all things, and especially the creator of this land and its original peoples, we call out to you in these desperate times as we see the first catastrophic fire warnings for New South Wales, as fires are already swept across several parts of our land. Our hearts cry out to you in desperation for those whose properties are affected by the ravaging fires and whose very lives are in danger. Father, we pray, in your mercy, restrain the forces of nature from creating catastrophic damage In your mercy, protect human life. Guard those who selfishly step into the breach to fight these fires. Guide police and authorities who help evacuate and shelter those who are displaced. Bring comfort and healing to all who suffer loss. Remembering that long ago you extended your hand through your servant Moses to stop the waters and then to return the waters to their normal course, so we pray for rain. In your mercy, we pray for drenching rain. We pray that despite the forecasts, in your miraculous power, you would bring forth rain to quench these fires and to bring back to life back into the earth, so that crops may grow and farmers may bring forth the harvest of the land again. We bring these requests before your throne in the name of your Son, who died and rose again for our deliverance. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend, and thank you for your service to the Wingecarribee and the community, and wish you well in your future life and pastoring, and you and your family. So thank you. And on a lighter note, it's good that we're going to get a bob from you in the future.
Mr Mayor, could I say a word?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Also, Reverend Mills, Richard, thank you for all your ministry. I've known you for quite some time through the council, and I have attended a number of your activities in Mittagong. The Carols by the Lake, of course, was fantastic and a big undertaking, and also the things around the church and so on. And I just wanted to personally and I'm sure all my councillors agree with what the Mayor said, but thank you for all your ministry service. Our loss, Denham Court's gain. You've got a lot more people up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. We move on to adoption of previous minutes, and we do note that Councillor Nelson has his hand half raised, and so at this stage, just watch very carefully when he votes tonight, whether he's in favour or against. Before I do that, we'll have apologies, and that is as printed. Councillors McLaughlin and Andrews. Somebody move Councillor Nelson. Seconded Councillor Turlin. Councillor Scandrett.
I'd like these two apologies to be dealt with separately, Mr Mayor, because I'm going to oppose the absence of Councillor McLaughlin. In this term, he's missed now 15...
No, thank you. No, Councillor...
You want to do it in debate?
No,
okay.
Councillor Scandrett. You are moving that they be dealt in seriatim.
Yes,
thank you very much.
And then I'll speak to that.
Thank you.
I'll speak to that.
Do you have a seconded that they be dealt with in seriatim? Move Councillor, seconded Councillor Howsett. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, if you wish to speak to it now.
Okay. All right.
But no, Councillor Scandrett, I know you know protocol, and you do not speak to a motion until you have a second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not going to support Councillor McLaughlin's request for leave of absence. In the 15 meetings he's missed this term, that's some over 20%, approaching 25%, we have remitted him a stipend of over $17,500. I'm sorry, but if you stand for council, you stand for council, and you attend as best you can. Family, medical, and other matters do intervene, but I'm sorry, sailing down the Murray River is not part of that, nor going to Alaska, nor going to Turkey, nor going to the Barrier Reef. No,
Councillor Scandrett.
They've been said in this chamber, Councillor. The record
Scandrett.
shows they've all been mentioned in this chamber. They've all been mentioned in this chamber.
Have you finished, Councillor Scandrett?
No, I haven't, Mr Mayor. I haven't. Look, we've got
To
six...
me, it appears to be a vindictive...
No,
sort
it's
of
not,
attack.
Mr Mayor. It's a statement of
Thank
fact.
you.
Here we are today, and if one councillor hadn't been here today, and then another councillor wanted to go to the bathroom, we wouldn't have had a quorum. There are 9 elected councillors. We've got 2 on sick leave, and that's most fair enough. No problem with that at all. No problem. But in terms of attendance, representing electorate, representing parties, whatever, you're not here and you're missing over nearly 25%.
I'm going to rule Councillor
Anyway,
Scandrett.
I'm voting against
Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin's leave of absence, and I'd like it recorded.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. The debate is centred on the seriatim, and you get latitude, Councillor Scandrett. So I put the motion. All those in favour that it be voted on in seriatim, raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Whipper, Halstead, and those against, Councillors Scandrett, Turland, Nelson and Gare. I will use my casting vote, as we have kept the status quo in the past, that we have allowed seriatim, so I will vote my casting vote, even though I voted against it, I'll use my casting vote in favour. So we will vote in seriatim. All those in favour that Councillor Andrews' name be recorded as an apology, raise your hand. Against, carried unanimously. All those in favour of McLaughlin, Councillor McLaughlin be absence be offered, please raise your hand. Councillors Turland, Nelson and Gare, against. Councillors Scandrett, Whipper and Halstead. As such, and it seems to be a very, very minor matter, but as a casting vote is needed to accept an apology, I will vote in favour. So Councillors McLaughlin's name will be recorded in favour. We move to the running sheet, and we have the adoption of previous minutes. I was absent at that meeting. I hope my apology is it accepted or not? Councillor Whipper seconded. Councillor Halstead, any discussion on the correctness of those minutes? Then I put that all in favour, against, carried. Declarations of interest. No declarations of interest. No mayoral minute. No public forum. We move on to the presentation of the audited annual financial statements for the period ended 30th of June 2019, and I'll ask Mr. David Nolan to come forward. To give his report in the financial affairs of council for the period ended 30th of June 2019. Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Good afternoon. Do you mind if I just diverge just a little? I'm glad to be at our council meeting today, but I've got some other councils at the moment that are doing it extremely tough up north. They're foremost in mind at the moment. I've got friends at Glen Innes and Tenterfield councils who are doing it tough. We had a team at Mid-North Coast who were evacuated, and I just would like everyone to keep those people in mind as we deliver a report, which no doubt they'll be doing fairly shortly themselves. Mr. Mayor, I'd love to go through my conduct of the audit report, and I would like to share what is a nice report to be able to share with the councillors and everyone here today. I provided an unmodified opinion on the general purpose financial statements, our special purpose statements, the roads to recovery, permissible income, and our pensioners' returns for the year. Very pleasing, and I don't have any significant items that I wish to report to the council. Mr. Mayor, may I actually go through some of the highlights of my report, just so that we can have a quick look at some of the ratios and some of the operations during the year to give an indication on how we went. The income statement is an area of focus for us, and during our period, our rates and annual charges have increased due to the special rate variations that we have during this year, and again, next year we'll be enjoying a similar rate of increase. contributions to the council have decreased slightly, but overall we've got an operating surplus that is comparable to last year, with a net operating result before our capital items being in surplus as well, which is always a very nice place to be. Our cash flows for the year proved to be quite healthy again, with at least $25 million of the cash flow items actually moving into our investment area during the year, which improved the council's financial position. Our financial position with regards to our cash and investments moved from $154 million to $171 million throughout the year, of which we've got 131 million of those that are externally restricted items, with the rest of the items being unrestricted or for internal restrictions by the council. Mr Mayor, our performance ratios is a nice story to actually share with everybody. I must admit it's one of the few times that I can actually go through the performance ratios in my report and I don't have to draw any attention to any particular ratio that isn't performing well. The operating performance ratio, our own sourced operating revenue ratio are all above the requirements of the Office of Local Government. Our unrestricted cash ratio and our debt service cover ratios are showing the strength in the balance sheet that we enjoy here. And Mr Mayor, our collection of our outstanding rates and other charges, we're actually doing better than inner city councils benchmark from OLG, so that is nice, and we've got a strong expense ratio cover to ensure that we've got the funds there available to move forward. I also make comment with regards to infrastructure, property, plant and equipment renewals. Our asset renewals have slightly decreased from last year, but I do note in our plans going forward we have some extremely healthy spends in our 1920 operational plan, showing budgeted of a good $57 odd million worth of capital for this coming year, and the next 4 years amounts that are exceeding $60 million each year. So that is also good and something to look forward to. Mr Mayor, just in finalising, I haven't identified any significant areas of non-compliance with any of the legislative items that we actually reviewed during the audit. The records were maintained in an appropriate manner for me to draw the conclusions that I need to for my opinions. And I would like to thank the team and the staff for the responsiveness, interaction and engagement with my teams as well. May I say it is enjoyable coming down to this part of the woods. And may I say that the responses to a lot of the information that we request is much faster than some of the larger departments that I deal with inside of the state sector. And I am always amazed by how quickly some of the finance team members get back to us with regards to the information that we do need so we can do our job quickly. Mr Mayor, in a nutshell, that's my report for you.
Thank you very much, Mr Nolan. Are there any questions from council? Councillors? Councillor Scandrett to Mr Nolan, through you, General Manager.
Through the General Manager, Mr Mayor. And thank you, Mr Nolan. I echo your comments. It's a very tidy, professional result. I also would like to comment on our staff through Mr Mooney, because just fantastic the work they do here. It's without reproach. Okay. I do want to ask you a slight curly one, and that is that we, on the Berrima Road deviation project in April this year, we moved to surrender, if you wish, the $4.6 million federal grant for that. Have you, at this point in time, taken account of that, or are you waiting for that to be surrendered to be executed? And if so, how will you take account of that?
No, as far as I'm concerned, my accounts include any commitments or obligations that we have with regards to funding or movement of funding at this stage.
Right, so you would have taken it out already.
If there's anything that needs to be adjusted, we will look at it, but I will have another view of it for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr Nolan. It's, I think the staff will be, can take a great deal of credit for your comments.
Yes.
We have an extremely good and efficient, through the General Manager, our FCO, Mr Richard Mooney, who take and are very, very diligent on accounting for every cent that is spent of ratepayers' money and money that comes in through various grants. So again, thank you for your positive comments. Our debt to service ratios and whatever are all above average or heading that way. And as you said, your other customers, so to speak, up north, the other councils there, we are in a much more fortunate position than them, that is for sure.
Definitely.
So, thank you very much again.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the run sheet, councillors, shows, we need move a motion that the recommendation that as printed on move councillor Scandrett and Whipper that the council adopts the audited annual financial statement for the year, and that Mr David Nolan be thanked for his comments.
And Mr Mayor, if you will, and that is that our own staff, led by Mr Mooney, be thanked for a great result.
That council staff, we don't put in
That's fine.
names.
In your words.
Council staff be thanked for their dedication and commitment to the financial statements as presented.
Yes. Great job, Mr CFO.
Yes, very, and well done through you, Madam General Manager, to Mr Mooney, and we're glad you're on the Highlands, Mr Mooney, as such. So I'll put that recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Now, according to the run sheet, we will move down to item 9.4 as such and ask the Chair of the Council's Audit Risk and Improvement Advisory Committee by Ms Jan Edwards to come forward to give her annual presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I believe that councillors have received a copy of my written report on the conduct this year. Thank you. So I don't intend to address it directly. I have a couple of talking points that I thought I'd speak to kind of round it out. This year has been a year of reasonably substantial progress, particularly on focus on risk. Historically, the Risk Audit and Improvement Committee has been very focused on the audit process and that being done in a timely and effective manner. And I have to say, I think, and I said this last year, great inroads had been met in that, the quality of that process over the years. And it's a very efficient now and effective process in my view in terms of working with and addressing any weaknesses brought forth by both the internal and external audit process and those that are determined in self-assessment by members of the council staff. So we turned our minds as a committee to a more in-depth reporting on risk, the major risks, not all risks, but the risks that could cause significant damage to the council, either financially, reputationally, or from a governance and legislative requirement view. And there has been a lot of progress on that this year, both within council and council management and its reporting to the committee. So there is more work to be done. There's more progress that we're working towards, but I'd say substantial progress has been made this year. In terms, there is one area of risk that the committee remains concerned about, that I understand that there is real progress in that as well, and we look forward to some reporting on that, and that is the state of the IT systems in council and the potential risk should plans for their how shall I say, retirement, not progress in the future, and that it is a potentially significant risk to council. So as a committee, we will look to having dialogue in committee about that particular risk going forward. I'll put that in the context of fairly recently a new Chief Information Officer was appointed after some reasonable period trying to find the right person. And from the reports we've had, which have only been, I think, one, about the progress that is being made under that new officer, I have great faith that we'll have some good plans going forward on that particular risk. As a last point, very recently, as in the last week, we received a draft of a paper put out by the Office of Local Government on the new risk management internal audit framework for local councils. It's a fairly substantial paper, and it's looking to upgrade the general professionalism across the sector of management of risk and audit review of that risk. The committee was asked to make comment about the draft paper. Councils were asked to make comment about the draft paper. And that paper comment has been made by members of the committee, and it has been included in a draft paper, which a draft letter which is intended to go forth in the next week or so. So we are replying to it, and hopefully we'll see what the outcomes of our comments are. Other than that, I didn't wish to add anything specific about my document itself, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions to Ms Edwards? Councillor Turlin.
Look, the question is, with the special rate variation, we've got quite a few millions of dollars that have come in and going through the process over 5 years. I think it's about 214 million by memory. Are you concerned that we're going to be able to do that work? Is that part of your
If I can be
platform to
frivolous for a
check?
moment, I hope so, because I live on an unpaved road.
Very good. It might be on the list. Should look on the net. But the concern is, can we
Yeah.
uphold the deal that we've actually got this money for in time? What I'm concerned, we don't have the staff or the
That's not a question I can answer in the position of chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. Is in terms of the audit that was completed on the projects. It was a clean audit. The process and the protocols are generally working quite well. And in terms of the staff numbers versus the work to be done, I'd suggest that may be a function of the whole of council in terms of the plans, the project plans in and of themselves for each of the major projects that are intended to be undertaken. We tend, in our particular committee, we do tend to look at the processes, the policies, processes, and protocols for each project. And there was no indication that there was a dramatic under-resourcing that was brought out in that audit.
You're aware of the stage. Well,
Yeah.
the Berrima overpass was a project that didn't go real well. Did you look at the process and the protocol of that?
At this point, we have not looked at that. It was
I
an
suggest
in-process
if we have a look at
situation.
that at the next.
I'll take that and notice.
No, sorry, no. You
Yep.
just let Ms Edwards finish.
Sorry?
The process, at the time that we've had our audit reviews, that particular project was in process of being understood better. And we tend not to audit specific processes in the internal and audit process, but more the framework within which projects happen. I would suggest that if the audit committee Risk Audit and Improvement Committee were charged with looking at every project and every potential issue with projects, it would be difficult. It's where it has a major impact on the organization. If as a council, whole of council, you agree that it was a major risk that was unaddressed, that had a major impact, then you could make the request of the committee, I would suggest.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Which
so
would
you're
in turn be
suggesting-
turned over to an internal audit.
Okay, so you're suggesting we put a notice of motion?
I'm not suggesting anything.
no.
I am not suggesting anything.
A bit more work?
Yeah.
Don't lead Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll...
I'm just making a statement about our role.
You got a question?
Any other questions? Councillor Nelson.
I haven't got a question.
Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good afternoon, Jan.
Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you. And look, just following on from Councillor Turlin's question there, I do agree that that particular project and the loss of that grant is a significant matter. It's 4.6 million.
Question, Councillor Scandrett, please.
So
I'm not going
my
to-
question to you is that at what level would you say might be considered to be significant? Because I think this is significant. But anyway.
That's exactly, that's not my determination, nor is it the committee's determination. We are an advisory group to the committee, but if the council as a whole agrees that it is a significant risk, then they should make a specific request.
Thank you. I think big projects
Thank you,
are.
Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Nelson.
No, I haven't got a question. I'd just like to move the motion, if I could. If I've got a seconder, I'd speak to it.
Councillor Halstead, Nelson and Halstead.
I'd just like to thank you for the report and also working with you. The committee has made great strides under your leadership and in conjunction with the staff that attend those committees. Your questions are quite probing and insightful, and some of the staff are put on their toes at different times. So I agree that there has been substantial progress made with that committee. And with your the committee's submission, with your signature, that's spot on, that letter that has been sent in. I've taken the time to read that. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. And yes, I think the community public should be aware that Ms Edwards' position is voluntary and takes it with a great deal of, as Councillor Nelson has just pointed out, with a due diligence and a lot of commitment. So thank you very much for your
Mr. Mayor.
contribution, Ms Edwards, and we look forward for the next 12 months.
Mayor, I think we could add a 2 there that reflects that.
Yes, it can be added that the council thank and congratulate the chair, Ms Edwards, on her involvement and commitment to the risk audit
And
risk and improvement.
it's a group
And
effort.
the other
yes.
volunteers, yes.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so we have the recommendation as moved by Councillor Nelson, second with Councillor Halstead. You happy to accept that those additions, Councillor Nelson and Halstead? Yes. Then I put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Ms Edwards. Thank you, Mr Nolan. If we move over to we follow the run sheet as now, and we go to item 9.2, which is the modification, section 450 of application to modified development consent, 12 Rochester Place, Bundanoon. And who do we... The run sheet? Well, we will follow, not as I've just read. Can I ask somebody that the run sheet is how I'm going to run it? So that is 9.2, and then we will do 9.3, adoption of rural tourism. So is there somebody to speak to item as visitor item? 9.2? Nobody to speak? That, 9.3, I see. Now I'm with you. Thank you very much. So the 9.3 on the run sheet is back to front. Is that what you're saying, Councillor Halstead? Thank you. And my continuation of it, so there's no speakers in relation to Rochester Place. Can we have an introduction, please, through you, Mr Wilton?
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to seek consideration of a development that was approved in 2015 for a dwelling house at 12 Rochester Bundadoon. In relation to this development, originally it was proposed that a colour palette provided for a dwelling house roof colour that was Woodlands Grey. On this occasion, the as constructed has been a colour of surf mist, and accordingly the applicant is seeking to modify the consent in order to rectify that issue.
Questions to Mr Wilton? No? So we have Councillor Scandrick.
I think you knew I was going to ask one anyway, Mr Mayor, on this. Mr Wilton, in your opinion, through page 9, the picture of the colour surf mist versus the picture on page 10 of the existing dwelling, I would put to you that that is a white roof, and you say it's surf mist, which is a light taupe or grey, if you wish. Which is it? I mean, can we have some comment?
Look, I'm not going... No, Mr Wilton, I ask you not to answer that.
Well,
I mean, it is subjective to the light, the way the photo's been taken, the colour. It is...
Mr
to
Mayor,
me,
with
that
respect,
is-
if you look at the wall colour
I will
on
not allow that
page...
question to Mr
Okay,
Wilton.
let me qualify this. On page 10, if you look at the wall colour of the dwelling, which is a grey, right, and that's quite clearly a grey, and yet the roof is quite clearly not... it's white.
Okay, then that is the colour.
Okay, let me change my question. Is there two parts to this? Is there a compliance part and then a 4.5?
Thank you. That is a question I'll allow.
Through the chair, as I mentioned previously, there is a compliance issue relating to this development. As I suggested, the roof colour was approved as Colorbond Woodlands Grey. It was constructed as Colorbond Surf Mist, and accordingly this section 4.55 seeks to rectify that anomaly in order to obtain an occupation certificate for this development.
Okay, there is a recommendation there. Councillor Halstead, question.
So what we can say is that people can put a roof in which does not comply with the DCP. When they're found out, because this is what's happened, someone's objected, certainly we looked at it as a council just driving through there, and we find a roof which is white, in my view.
Question.
Won't go into... Question is, can we look forward to this being a continual process where people basically ignore the DCP, do their own thing, and then seek some modification? Because if so, that's a hell of a concern, Mr Mayor.
I take your point. Through you to Mr Wilton.
Through the chair, obviously we have to treat these as two separate issues. So the compliance issue, if council chose to, could issue an order on the property, could further seek to remedy the issue by a penalty infringement notice. But in terms of an application, any applicant can lodge a section 4.55 to modify the actual existing or proposed roof colour. Obviously, council is required to then consider that and assess that, and obviously make a recommendation and a determination.
Councillors? Move Councillor Turlin, secondly Councillor Nelson. Do you wish to speak? I'll make a comment. Because I was a bit like Councillor Halstead when we first saw it. It was in total contrast to the other houses around it, and I thought, gee, this is a move away from, you know, the Highland Grey, if you want to call it, which 90% of all roofs are in the Highlands at the moment, because that's the fashion, that's the colour scheme. And then I happened to go to Kingscliff. There is not one house roof up there that is not this colour or white hurt. So, and everything looks fine. Because there is a contrast, it stands out. I have no trouble with it. So I'll be supporting the recommendation. On the other side of it, there's been a huge debate around climate change in this chamber, and if anybody should be pushing for white roofs or changing our DCP so white roofs are the standard, it should be those who are advocating climate change, because reflective heat, we all know, is white, or reflects heat. You want to attract, put on a deep colour. So I see no problem with this. And if you want to use the argument that it's a bit helping climate change, this one house, then so be it. So that's my position. Councillor Scandrett.
My view is different, Mr Mayor. I mean, we could address climate change. I didn't realise that it came down to roof colours so much. I thought it was about hard surfaces like the road in the picture on page 15. That's certainly a heat sink. But we can put whirlybirds in roofs and proper ventilation and proper thermal windows and all of that. What I'm interested in here is, and we were there, we spent quite a bit of time, as it so happened, at Rochester Estate. We hung around for quite a while on the day because it's a historical site and this subdivision is part of that. Now, I noticed some of the comments here that were against this change of roof colour. Too reflective and bright, as we are downhill and have direct sight of said roof all day. Another comment here is, out of ambience with surrounds, no other properties have such a highly, brightly covered rooftop. Now, it was only last term, Councillor Turner, you might remember, when we had a matter out here in West Mossvale where a roof suddenly appeared contrary to the certification as bright gal when it was actually meant to be a subdued colour. And there was a remedy taken place there which council had to be involved in because it affected the neighbours. Nothing about climate change, Mr Mayor. It was about reflecting back onto neighbours and up at the hill, and at certain times of the day it stood out like the proverbial. And I think that's what we saw here when we were out there on the bus looking at Rochester itself, and we drove down the bottom here to see this subdivision, and we saw that one house stood out enormously. And I know when it's landscaped and when the paint fades a bit and all that sort of thing, that'll be a different thing. But at the moment, A, it's totally contrary to the approval, and it's being tried to be rectified by a section 4.5 variation. But two, is it appropriate in the context of that estate, in the context of all the other houses in that street, and the general view of Bundanoon, which is a very, if you wish, peaceful village, and to have this bright, light building, not only the roof, but the walls are bright. It's as the photographs show in the report, the building looks like it's all light. So I'm not keen to progress this. However, I recognise the right of the applicant to make the application, but quite frankly, I think we should defer this, and I think we should go for another drive out there, Mr Mayor, on our next inspections, and just review this, because I don't think it sits well in the environment.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Nelson.
I'll be moving that amendment.
I don't think
well,
that,
hang on, Bruce, will you resume your seat, please, Councillor Nelson? Councillor Scandrett is moving a deferral and that a further inspection be undertaken. Do
Yes.
you have a seconder?
We will see.
I'll call second time and it lapses for want of a seconder.
Let
Councillor
it be recorded.
Nelson.
as Councillor Scandrett said, Mr Mayor, we were out there for a length of time looking at the houses. The private certifier approved this, and all we're doing is correcting a problem. And I certainly hope that the neighbour is not affected too much by the brightness of the roof. But to fight this, Mr Mayor, we would end up losing because the staff have approved it, and it would only cost the council ratepayers money. So reluctantly, I have to vote for this recommendation. So one of those anomalies.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Turlin.
This might be my right of reply, so.
Yes, it could be your right of reply.
Page 13, item 1.6, building material, item A. This is our DCP from what I understand. For this area, the use of zinc aluminum is not permitted, or galvanised sheet may not be used within specific council consent. So this is just, it doesn't mention dark roofs in Bundanoon or anywhere else through the Shire. From what I understand, it probably the only place it probably does would be at Renwick, and you can confirm that at a later date. I would think that's the only place would be Renwick that's in black and white. It is not black and white in Bundanoon to have any colour. It just means that the person who owns the place has changed their mind after the event and put in a roof colour, not knowing that the chances are that it would be a problem. And it's clear on the plans it actually shows the colour that should have been. We've seen that. But they have every right to change if they want. It's a timing issue that's happened here. It's a timing issue. That's all it is. They've done it before they've asked for consent. And as it is, I don't think council could knock it back even if it was done in the right timing, because there is nothing. It is silent on the colour. And you are right. Dark roofs produced heat. They're a heat bank. This is a much better roof that should be right through the Shire and probably right through the state, is light colours. Dark should be thrown out. It's ridiculous. And I've built quite a few dark house roofs because that's what everybody wanted. But light roofs are better for everybody in the environment. So you are right with the climate change. It is and should be one of the things under the basics requirements should be light roofs. The rest of the house being white and cream is fine. It doesn't generate heat. It's good. It's a good design. And once the landscape goes around it, nobody's going to even know what colour the walls are. And in a few years' time, the roof will fade off. It'll be covered in dust and spiders and the rest of it, and nobody will care. There's not a problem with it. It is silent in the DCP.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. And I will put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillors Turlin, Nelson, Whipper and Gare. Those against? Councillor Scandrett and Halstead. I declare the motion carried. And just before we move on, tomorrow any person in Widgecarribee can go and paint their roof a different colour to what it is, and it will not require a DA. Okay, we move on to 9.4 now, adoption of rural tourism policy, and we have Mrs Laurel Cheetham who will address council against this recommendation. Come forward, Ms Cheetham.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors. I'm not totally against this proposal. I'm only against a couple of points, and I'd like to recommend a deferral of one part of it. My concerns about the proposals for encouraging tourist-oriented development in rural areas are related to the potential impacts on landscape. When I've travelled both in Australia and overseas, I'm constantly reminded by people I meet that I live in a beautiful area. The area they're referring to is not the urban environment, but the rural landscape. I'm pleased to see that the policy we're talking about has been amended to exclude the two of the most sensitive landscape areas from consideration because they're heritage landscape conservation areas. These are the areas surrounding Berrima and the area between Bowral and Moss Vale urban area. But what about the rest of the Shire? I'm going to talk first about the rural tourism policy as presented in this report to Council. The policy, if adopted, would provide a pathway for proponents to obtain support from Council for the rezoning of rural land to SP3 tourist. I note that this pathway includes addressing criteria for determining when Council will consider a planning proposal to rezone land to SP3 tourist. The criteria include impact on high-value environmental land and high-value agricultural land, but not impact on landscape. Why not? Particularly, when we look at the DA stage, any DA would be required would require development to be sympathetic with the rural setting and landscape features of the site and minimise impact on the scenic values of nearby development and land use activity. the policy should be amended so that as part of the pathway process, proponents are required to demonstrate how their development will be sympathetic with the rural setting and scenic values of the area within the visual catchment of the property for which they are requesting a rezoning. So I'm not really saying no, I'm just making a suggestion for an addition. With regard to the proposal to amend the LEP to permit function centres in RU2 rural landscape zones, what do we want people driving into or through our region to see? Much of the land bordering the main routes is zoned RU2 rural landscape. This proposal is to permit function centres in this zone. So do we want our rural landscape to be glimpsed through a wall of conference, convention, events, buildings, or do we wish to maintain the rural landscape per se?
That's it.
That's it. Oh,
That is 3 minutes.
okay.
But it's a visitor item, so you can you can take questions,
Right.
and you may be able to fill in a bit of time. But the
Okay.
new meeting practice says.
Oh, I thought it was 5 minutes.
Okay, well, we'll have to get that clarified for all people who go to meetings.
introduce it at the time.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Now, we have any questions to Ms Cheetham? Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Cheetham, in terms of your concerns about RU2 function centres, could you just elaborate on those, please?
Yes, definitely. Why has the RU2 zone been put forward as the area for function centres, where function centres could be considered appropriate? If we look at the objectives of the RU2 zone, they include to maintain the rural landscape character of the area. Now, a function centre is a building or place used for the holding of events, functions, conferences and the like, and includes conference centres and reception centres, but not entertainment centres. I find it very difficult to see how a development of that would fit that definition can also maintain the rural landscape character of the land.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Nelson?
Yes, you raised in your submission about between the green between.
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate on
Yes,
that?
I've looked at the zonings and the heritage landscape conservation areas. Most of the areas in between towns would now be our heritage landscape conservation areas, so they now would be excluded from the tourist, the potential for them to be rezoned tourist, for special use as tourist. However, while I say that, areas that are outside, just outside those areas, could still be considered. So it is our rural landscape in a broader sense, not just the areas of the green between that are of concern.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you, Ms Cheetham.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Whipper?
Just flagging that I'll move a motion, Mr Mayor, but
Okay.
before I do, just a question, if I could, to
Yes, questions?
staff. Just on that point, through you, Mr Mayor, in terms of rural landscape protections, is it possible just to get some comment from staff
Yes,
in
you're
relation to
welcome
that? Thank you.
Yes, in particular, in...
Rural landscapes,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Ms Stannard.
Through the General Manager. Just commenting on some of the comments that were made. The reason we looked at the RU2 zone was because the focus for the impetus for the rural tourism policy was we were up against the E3 zone, and the only option was to rezone to SP3 tourist. The RU2 zone, bringing the RU2 zone into the mix does provide a degree of flexibility. It perhaps removes some of the pressure off that E3, SP3 interface. We then tried to buffer that flexibility with putting into the local environmental plan the heads of consideration that strengthened the assessment criteria under which that the assessment of a planning proposal would occur. Taking the point about the impact in the landscape, I would expect the concept master plan that would accompany the application to address that, but that is certainly something that we could incorporate in as well to ensure that.
So just to clarify, if I could, Ms Stannard, in terms of the applications that would come forward in both E3 zones and RU2 zones, there would be certain criteria and expectations of the development that would go in there to protect those characteristics as well.
The heads of consideration clause that is part of the recommendation to amend the LEP to include addresses those. That's the intent of those, and it does have the catch-all any other matter considered by council. So we can then support those with further controls in the development control plan specific to function centres, which could tease out particularly its noise and traffic in particular when it comes to the actual development itself. But we could certainly emphasise through the DCP controls impact on design and landscape and so on.
You've got questions?
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Turlin.
So we have got plenty of safety nets for the neighbours that might be concerned about properties that might want to or could comply or apply for. We will have safety nets.
We attempt to ensure that a development doesn't have a neighbour impact. The end of the day, the effectiveness of some of the controls that are at our disposal may mitigate against that. The concerns expressed by our council staff with regard to noise in particular is something that would need to be specifically addressed in DCP controls to be managed.
Would noise also be the facility of where it might be next to a house? In other words, the boundary? You've got 140 acres, 40 hectares, 100 acres, and two houses are less than on the boundary, 20 metres apart. That is not a good situation, is it? It needs to be further apart.
Yeah, so the concept master plan would demonstrate where on the site the proposal would be. It may be that only a portion of the site is permitted, rezoned, or permitted to have those activities on it to ensure that the remainder of the site was protected from environmental or agricultural impacts.
Just returning us.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I've just got concerns with the issue of farm stays, in that we're recommending from 3 to 5, and there's been submissions put in commenting about that Bathurst, the Bathurst area has 10 rooms. And I also understand that Shoalhaven have something like 7 and Kiama 5. So if you could elaborate on the issues of farm stays maybe being considered stick to 5, or is it council should be thinking about maybe 6, 7?
Through the General Manager. We are limited, not just with farm stay, but with a number of the definitions that are in the standard instrument as to the degree of flexibility we have. The definition of farm stay requires that it be, first of all, a working farm, and that secondly, farm stay be ancillary to that primary production activity. So given the average lot size for farming activities in Wingecarribee compared with perhaps other areas of the state, we're not looking perhaps at the scale of farming development that we might get elsewhere, and therefore one of the primary functions that the assessing officers have to do is to determine that it is a working farm and the extent to which that activity then allows an ancillary use. So we thought the five was an improvement on 3, but to increase it to 10, for example, that's what people would ask for if they could, if we had 10 as the maximum. Feel that would lead to unrealistic expectations that couldn't be met, and we were better with a five bedroom limit.
So, just to clarify what Councillor Nelson has, because my understanding is this is probably just the major sticking point in relation to to those supporting it. That is there a basis for, say, if a farm employed, I don't know, 100 people, that size of area and production would allow then to justify the 30. Is there a formula that allows 10 rooms? Is there, or how do they justify the 10 rooms? Do you know?
No, this is a sticking point because there is no formula. And as I say, it's been difficult for assessing officers to determine that is A, a working farm, and that B, it's going to continue to be so into the future. We're aware that there are these issues. We know that the industry would like to see a higher number of bedrooms, and we can certainly continue to work with them to bring about, to see what we can do. But there is no fixed definition.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Stannard. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, a few questions through you, if I may. Just a qualification first, and that is, what percentage of our lands, roughly, of our farmlands is E3, roughly?
49%, it's in the report. It's in the report.
Yeah,
49%.
49%?
Yeah, page 50.
Thank you, Councillor. No, I just wanted to say it in the chamber, that's all, because, and I just wanted to also ask, it's a planning report, but was there any consultation taking place with our economic development section?
Yes, there was.
and could you just elaborate on what that feedback was?
Yes, through our economic development officer, who initiated a meeting with key stakeholders. We had a very productive, positive meeting, and the reason there's been a delay in bringing the report back to council is that we've really tried to find ways that we can assist the tourism industry while not compromising the legitimate concerns of residents.
And do you think you've achieved some?
I've done the best I can. Some things are possible, some things might be possible, and some things aren't possible. And I think this report sort of gives the best context for that.
Thank you. And could I just have, Mr Mayor, just if you would, could I have asked Mr Mooney to define what is a primary producer, please? It's
okay, that is separate to...
No, it's quite relevant to this.
No, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm asking question to Ms Stannard,
okay.
And then whether there is room for your other question. So that is your finish there?
Yes, I'll be moving an
And if
amendment.
anybody wants to know what Dorothy Dixes are, Councillor Scandrett just asked them. Thank you, Ms. No, sorry, we've got...
Another question?
I've got a question if I may, if you don't mind.
Do you have a question or you're looking to move the recommendation? Councillor...
Yeah, I'm just looking for the draft report, and I know it's on the motion there, but there's no mention in the draft report on the amount of rooms, is there? Have I missed that somewhere? It's in the recommendation, but it's not in the draft.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Is it? It's
Well,
in the policy. I'm
farm
looking
stay
for
is
it.
not in the policy. The policy is around the context of rezoning from, rezoning to SP3 tourist or to an alternative. Now, the heads of consideration were put into the policy as an interim, but the report is in two parts, the policy and other amendments to the LEP that can be made, and it's in that
Okay, I was just concerned that
section.
it wasn't actually.
They will go to the LEP.
Yeah.
Okay, because it says policy, and it's actually not in it.
That the draft rural tourism policy as attached be adopted. And that a planning
Okay,
proposal be
just want
prepared.
to make sure that we're not going down the path and then it all.
Falls over. That will not happen. That will not happen. Okay.
A little quick question.
One little quick question. Councillor McLaughlin is not here.
No,
Councillor
it's
Nelson.
not. Do you think that, having regard to the recommendation that we're moving here tonight, is there room for a review period for any of this to be undertaken?
Yes, we're always willing to review situations. The local environmental plan is an eternal review of, and as are the DCPs, as to how we're moving in the Shire and how things are working or not working. So we're always open to a review, yes.
One more tiny question.
Councillor Scandrett, I think you've asked your quota, and I don't think what makes a working farm is relevant to this policy. So I cannot.
Like the other two councillors, can I have one more question, please?
Well, you
It
treat
is,
us
I will
all
allow,
fairly, I know
as
you
the
do.
importance of this
Equitable.
document,
It's big.
it's taken a lot of work, but please make it relevant and.
I could have done it by now. Through you to Mr Dunnard. E3, 49% of our farming land in the Shire. When this all came in some years ago, the way I saw it was we sort of went, well, we'll just put that over all of those.
Question, Councillor Scandrett.
Would you like to comment on whether there's subsets, if you wish, that could be had within E3? The report refers to perhaps seeing different parts of E3 as separate to the other parts. A lot of E3 is grassland, paddock, for example.
We're limited by the zones that are in the standard instrument, and the E3 zone is a standalone zone. It doesn't come in bits. The E3 zone came out of the rural landscape zones that were in the 1989 LEP. So they reflect our areas where we've got high environmental land and high landscape values. This has been confirmed through our more recent mapping, which has now brought everything up to date. So that is one reason why we looked at, could another zone be perhaps offered to provide flexibility, and by putting the onus onto the proponents to demonstrate that they weren't impacting on the areas that are highly sensitive, it was enabling some flexibility in considering doing something with that part of the land. So it is possible to rezone a portion of the land, but not have sets within that different categories of E3 zone.
Thank you, Ms. Tanner.
Thank you.
And thank you for your input.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, there's no qualification at this point, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Whipper has been waiting very patiently in the wings.
Notice, thank you.
And I will ask, when you do address Councillor Whipper, the suggestion that this be a review be commenced in 18 months. Would you accept that into your policy?
Well, I can, but the motion that I am moving, I'm amending it slightly as well.
Oh, right.
So I'm happy to include a review in 18 months' time. We could put that down as an extra point, but I'll wait.
Okay, so where are you different from the from the recommendation.
The recommendation, what I'm proposing with the acceptance of the seconder, is that point A, increase the maximum number of bedrooms in farm stay accommodation to a maximum of 8. That's the
Of
motion.
8 bedrooms.
That's right, yeah. And if I do have a seconder, I can speak to that. Thank you. Councillor Turland, I think you've seconded. Yeah. So, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to congratulate the staff on putting this this policy together. I think it goes a long way to not only meeting, I think, you know, those concerns, addressing those concerns of our tourism industry, but also I think there are a number of safeguards as well within the policy itself, particularly within the E3 zones in terms of biodiversity, protection of our endangered ecological communities, and those rural landscapes as well. I think they're things that make this Shire unique, and I believe we've come a long way over the years. I mean, when I first got onto council and we would have discussed something like this, I would have had concerns. I remember when the wine industry first, and you would as well, Councillor Gare, when the wine industry first introduced itself into the Shire, there was enormous concerns about what that was going to do to the Shire and to the landscape. Well, we've come a long way in those 20 odd years, and I think that there's a certain mutual respect and partnership that's grown between council and the industry as well. Food and wine industry is a big attraction for tourism, and it increases the economics of the Shire as well. We know that. It's a substantial employer of people within the Shire, and it attracts people from not only Sydney but throughout Australia into the region as well. So I have a lot of, particularly with the advent of the stakeholders, the Southern Highlands Key Stakeholders Group, coming together and working alongside of council in not only this policy, but to maintain those things that we find we hold dear in the Shire, and that is our rural landscapes, our E3 zones. And God, I thank God that we do have our E3 zones. They've really made us something different and set us apart from other areas. And I think there's a real understanding and a commitment and a connection with the industry as well, the tourism industry, and the benefits of E3 zones and what we can achieve through that. So I think it's something that we can market as well, but protect through this policy. I know that genuine farmers on the land are doing it really tough. We know that everything's diversifying. The whole economy around, food is changing. So it's more of a global business this day. So I think we have to look at some diversification for people on the land as well. And I believe those genuine farmers who are really appreciative and supportive of those values that we hold dear here in the Shire can be achieved through that working partnership. So I think allowing a bit of diversity in those economics for farmers, I think is quite a valuable thing. So I'm asking councillors to support this recommendation. I believe that it's been well received and also discussed, at the stakeholder group level and within the industry itself. So I think it takes us that step forward. And councillors, ultimately this will go to the Department of Planning. The Department of Planning will have to agree with it. They'll have to sign off on it anyway. But one of the things that we've faced that's been a real impediment to the growth of the industry is, and I know I have to stop, it's terrible stopping in mid-sentence, isn't it? But maybe I can remember what I said and bring it up in right of reply.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Scandrett. Thank you, Councillor Whipper.
You give me the call. Okay. Well, 8's a very good number. I think that's something I'm going to support, that part of your motion. I want to speak to some other elements of that. And the definition of a primary producer according to the tax office, Mr Mayor, is operating a primary production business where they undertake plant or animal cultivation or both, fishing, pearling, etc., etc. And to get the concessional rates here, and I know this because I'm the only farmer on council, and I do get the concessional rates, declaring that, because I am a registered primary producer and I do farm beef cattle. It's pretty important at the moment, as Councillor Whipper mentioned, that we try and give some support to farmers who want to do this, not only because of the current drought, but I mean, even if it was good, we had a glut in tourism at the moment, and then it fell over and there was a drought in tourism, we'd be talking about supporting them as well. So it can be a way of doing that. I equally think of all the farmers here who have supported our activities in keeping the environment of this area very sound. People, Councillor Whipper, out at the Sutton Forest Way and Exeter and Sutton Forest and so on, because they have put their money where their mouth is to support the environmental policies of this shire. In fact, we have signs outside this very chamber along that. So they're important. I do point out that a farm could have shearing quarters. I know that's not quite rural tourism, but you could have 20 people staying on a farm. There are a number of farms just in this local district here, 600 to 1,000 acres, and they do have substantial staffing on them at peak times. So employment is a very big part of what we're talking about today. Now, I would have liked, having chaired economic development for around 3 years, I would have liked to have seen some more movement. But an 18-month review, that's the new council, I think that's a very good start, and I'll be supporting that. But going forward, how do we integrate the inbound tourism needs of the Shire? We've got a whole lot of activities happening out on rural lands at the moment that aren't covered by any of our planning laws. Most of them, I think, are very well run, but they are currently not allowed for in our planning. I think we need to develop some strategy in that area to encourage and regulate, if you wish, that sort of thing. The amount of activity we're seeing in the inbound overnight activity, we did a debate on Airbnb recently, and we know that activity is huge, not only in our towns, Mr Mayor, and our villages, but on our farms.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Turland.
Anybody with 100 acres is not a true farmer. You can hardly grow enough beef at, 15 weaners a year on 100 acres? There's only one true farmer here, and he's sitting up the back corner. He's got rural land, and he has a rural farm, and there's very few of those people within the Shire at this point in time. When we grew up, there was, 47, 50 dairies in the area?
165.
160, well, yeah, okay. I married one of them, so I should know. But anyway, but the issue is now, 100 acres is not a real farm. It is just a hobby farm. It's getting a tax deduction for not really farming as we know, what we knew as farming. Your father would have grown vegetables on his farm when you were on the farm as a kid. My father-in-law did the same thing for his cattle, his dairy farm. So, farmers are doing it tough, there's no doubt. If you've got 100 acres, you're not really making any money out of it. It will be secondary to the income in theory, but the theory is that at least the people, we're 600 rooms short in this Shire by the New South Wales State Government stats of accommodation. This is a way of meeting that gap without putting pressure in the heart of town. It's putting it out in other areas. In an E3 zone, if you had 100 acres, environmentally protected, 50 acres of that could be trees and scrubs you can't do anything with. So then you've got half that land to try and produce, 10 cows, 10 calves? It's getting less and less. And with the drought, you've probably got none. We drove around today. How many cattle did we see on the paddocks? Very few of them. This is a way of helping the farmers and also helping the shortfall of the accommodation which is in our Shire. It's perfect. The only thing I am concerned about, reviewing this in 18 months, that means you've got to go through the whole planning proposal process again. And that is not going to be a very quick process. This will probably take minimum 6 months to go through its process if we're lucky. So, you know, even if we try and review it in 18 months, we've then got another 6 months after that to get it through the process. But, happy to leave it in there, but be aware, it's a slow process to do a planning proposal. So, this is a way of helping the farmers. It's also a way of meeting the gap of the shortfall of the 600 rooms we're short in the Shire. And what impact does it do on the infrastructure? There's no sewer, no water, there's a bit of road, there's only power. But for the council itself, it is no impact, not at all, nothing. But if it was in the heart of town, you've got all those infrastructure costs that put impact on our own services. So this is good. It's actually, and to increase it to 8, the only thing I think you should also consider, Mr. Councillor Whipper, is the bed and breakfast, because if there's a few out there that are already in the areas, it really needs to be even. It can't be one and one not. But you can think about that in your right of reply. It should be 8 of each. But otherwise, I think it's a good policy. Bit concerned about another 6 months before it possibly goes through its process, but that's the planning system.
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is an excellent report, culminating from a lot of hard work from the council staff. The council has had information sessions and the community. So the work's been done that provides a balance between growth for tourism and protecting the agricultural land and the highlands environment. There was a bit of a concern about the farm stay, and one of the submissions talks about that, and I'll just read a bit of that in how he explains that the industry feedback has been more than 5 bedrooms is required for an operation to effectively supplement their income with viable accommodation offering. Operators have explained that after considering factors such as capital outlay for accommodation, the cost of repairs and maintenance of the rooms, and the effort required implementing a practical cleaning solution with staff or a local service provider, and the percentage of sales commission paid to online distributor platforms, a critical mass of at least 10 bedrooms essential for viability in order for the Southern Highlands destination to remain competitive with other destinations such as central New South Wales, Bathurst. We encourage Wingecarribee Shire to please consider the possibility of allowing 10 bedrooms. So Councillor Whip has covered that and the staff have covered that. The lands over the mountains are much larger and can possibly accommodate that. So we could have a situation where someone has 40 acres here, has 8 bedrooms, subdivides, and you've got 8 on 20. So we've got to watch out for those sort of practicalities. But there's also a few other people have written in, and even I won't name this one, but he says here, we will of course, if necessary, mobile our many supporters in the interest of seeing places like X continue. So I sort of took that as a threat in this submission, Mr. Mayor. So wasn't very happy about that. And then some of the other submissions say, we are not in favour of rural zoning to be changed. We feel the beautiful rural landscape must be preserved. The back roads are not suitable for any more traffic, which would occur with the opening up and expansion of tourism businesses and function centres. There also needs to be more stringent monitoring of existing facilities which are being permitted. Do not allow the money-hungry developers to spoil this beautiful area.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
So there's two sides to this. We're trying to provide a balance in this report.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, I'm in a quandary, Mr. Mayor. I value the landscape of this district highly. I'm very concerned, the more I listen to some councillors here, and particularly those when they wander around the Shire, sometimes you're with them, and they talk about, the progress, and we must have this and must have that. We are going to see a dramatic erosion of the rural landscape, in my view, as a result of a whole lot of things, not the least of which, can I dare say, function centres, because that's the one I'm going to hone in on. But the other issues, for example, the bedrooms and the farm stay, I actually support that. When I first looked at it, I thought 5's about right, and then I'm thinking, well, you know, in a genuine operation, 8 would be, you know, quite capable of being supported, I think. And that certainly is a genuine way of supporting a farmer, which I certainly do. What would really worry me is if there was an increase in the one to do with bed and breakfast, for example, any more than the figure that's there, because to me any more than that is tantamount to a boarding house in a rural area, which is totally unacceptable as well. We're going to have trouble with them in the urban area, let alone the rural. Allowing function centres in the rural landscape zone, to me, is an absolute nightmare, and we're going to see the end result of that. To me, the biggest problem we've got in this show at the moment is function centres bobbing up everywhere, legally in some cases, although rare, and illegally in most cases. You know, we have some sort of disturbance taking place, someone does something without any approval, no hint of trying to seek an approval for something, and then when they're caught out, they seek some sort of retrospective approval for a function centre. They're going to be a big problem. Where do we go from here? I don't have any problem with the artisan food and drink industry situation. I am concerned that the function centres will be a problem. They are a problem. But one thing I can say is, on balance, when you look at what's proposed here, and I certainly hope it gets up, is that the whole idea of function centres be excluded from temporary use. Because if ever there has been a clause that has been manipulated and bastardised in this whole state of New South Wales, is the temporary use. It's very clear when that was put there was for one use in a 12-month period that was for something that wouldn't normally be allowed. And yet we've got this, you know, 5 years at 7 events and all this sort of stuff, and then we're here today, someone was contemplating 30 events inside a year. What a farce. So that to me is the big problem, is the function centres, and this district should not be raped environmentally as a result of things like that, where people just move in and before you know, it's sort of semi-commercial in a rural area. So we've got a real big problem. So I'm glad to see that the action there is to get rid of function centres. There should be a whole lot of other things, and I don't think this will get up, by the way, but I hope it does, out of the temporary use. Because the temporary use, quite frankly, should be dismissed full stop out of the whole standard document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead, and I'll compliment councillors on the quality and the time that you spoke, and using your time without being rhetorical or boring in presentations. So I'll have my comment before your right of reply. And Councillor Halstead, I'll concentrate a little bit on what you said, because I happen to agree with you. And that is, I'll ask Councillor Whipper in your right of reply not to throw a spanner in the works by suggesting bedrooms for B&B being increased, because I don't want to vote against this. And I am concerned with the 8. I'll be surprised, it will surprise me if the Department of Planning give it the tick, because although Ms Stannard said that there's no actual criteria, but plucking a number out of the air and say, well, we'll just increase it to 8 because that looks good and it might solve the bed problems we have, I don't think that will wash. And that's why I suggested that we have the 18-month, as supported by Councillors Whipper and Nelson, that we have a review. Because yes, it's going to take time. It's taken nearly 18 months, 2 years to get it to this point, trying to work with the industry, and it's that number of beds. And having been raised, and I was raised in this industry, on a farm where people came to stay, and they were up to 60, and it was a guest house, not operating now. So if anybody's got the experience on this one, I have. Will it work? Yes, but the outlay by, and we're talking about the farmers, whatever, the outlay to build accommodation of 8 bedrooms to make it into a functioning and viable, and that's a great place to go and I want to go back again, is going to cost a lot of money. It's not cheap. And Councillor Turland is right. The viability of 100 acres, unless it is intensive viticulture or horticulture or plants of some nature, is very difficult to pay. So I'll support the 8. I don't think it's going to get through. I'd like to have let it run as it is and review it and see how it works. But that is the will of council. I can read that, so I'll support it. As I say, it's got to go through the gates, and we'll see what the planning department does. But in relation to the bane of Councillor Halstead's existence on these function centres, well, we'll see how that runs. And we'll see how we can work with the industry to make it viable. Councillor, would be your right of reply.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, look, I think there's been a lot of positive debate around the table. I'm looking forward to support for the motion, and I think that everyone is on the same page. I don't support an increase in the bed and breakfast because farm stay I see is something totally different. So I'm happy to leave that the way it is. But we've come a long way, and I think working with the industry, the way we've been doing that, I think we're coming to an understanding. And certainly my feeling from the industry is that they value what we've got to offer here as much as the people that live here. I mean, what are the alternatives? That these beautiful rural spaces become, urban developments? We lose our charm straight away. I think the industry is mature enough and sensible enough to know that this is something we can market. It's something unique, and just by the mere fact that over many, many years, previous councillors have also valued the things that we enjoy. Our E3 zones, our enormously complex biodiversity, our recognition of Aboriginal Gundungara land, they're all things we can market. Things that we can educate, things that we can all enjoy. I often say to people, just the experience of the beautiful night sky is amazing. Those things are just natural things that are given to us to value and to respect. I think that working together with the industry, there is that commonality, that understanding, and as I said, we're starting to manifest, I think, what it is here in the Shire that is important. We're a breathing space between Sydney, Canberra and the coast, and that's valuable. That's been recognised way back by a Section 117 direction many, many years ago, over 20, 30 years ago. But we've been able to maintain the characteristics of the Shire through, I think, people being attracted to this area, coming with the right mindset and the right connections and respect for the area. Our food and wine industry, our equine industry, all those things are starting to work with us rather than against us. So I think that if we can go to the department with a common cause and say that we support this, then I think we can be quite influential. One of the things that we've experienced as a frustration for many years has been that standard template that doesn't discriminate between a development in Glebe and a development in Bowral. It's ridiculous. I mean, we're so different. And I think we value that. People that live here and know this area, that have been born here, that have grown here, that have lived here for decades, understand that and I think connect with the spirit of the place. That's what we're trying to do, preserve that and, recognise what the natural assets are and what the persona of the Shire is. So, councillors, I ask you to support the recommendation.
Thank you. And before we put it, Councillor Whipper, this one, as I said, has taken a great deal of effort and time of staff, and I think with your indulgence or 0.5, that the appropriate staff be thanked for their input and in relation to this, because it has taken a lot of work, and I know Ms. Stannard over there has put in a huge amount of effort. Long time, it has come a long way, because I introduced the motion in 1997, I think, that council will permit a farm stay. And the first farm stay was at Mulberry Farm at Burrowing. I put the recommendation as moved by Councillors Whipper and seconded by Councillor Turland. All in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried unanimously. So we move on to page 56. Post-exhibition report. This is another one that has taken a long time. Proposed lease of 1A Rainbow Street, Mittagong, known as the Aboriginal Centre. And the recommendation, the council enter into a lease with the Illawarra Local Aboriginal Land Council for a period of 99 years. That's it, basically, in a nutshell. Move Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Halstead. Discussion, Councillor Whipper. Do you want any introduction to it, or are you happy to?
I'm happy to speak, yeah.
Right.
This has gone through a long consultation process, as we know, councillors. It's been about 18 months plus. We've involved the community. There have been some divided, I suppose, expectations of what this is, but I believe that council are not really culturally, what can I say, a culturally appropriate mechanism to manage an Aboriginal cultural centre. There's no doubt in my mind that the Illawarra Land Council, which are the land council for this area, are much more culturally appropriate in terms of working closer and being able to make more achievements for the local Aboriginal community as well. There is some history there, of course, we know that, but I think it's time in the spirit of reconciliation we have to move on. And the only way to move on is to come together, to work together, to put our differences to rest and work to a common cause. One thing that did come out of the consultation process is the unanimous agreement within the community, whether it be Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal, that we should do this for future generations. Irrespective of what the politics is, what the understandings are, what the agendas are, everybody agrees that the future is critically important. I believe that the proper management of this site will achieve that. How many years have council been involved in this? And we know that the mechanisms of local government, 355 management committees, just don't work. Certainly not, they're not culturally realistic. And we know we've had many attempts. I've been there for a lot of them and a lot of those years, and I've seen the frustration and the impediments to actually to self-determination, really. So I think this is a step forward. I believe that if this is endorsed by council tonight, that we will move forward and that opportunities will open up and there will be opportunities for more funding and the better provision of services from that cultural centre, and it will, with the community participating and cooperating, move forward. So I'm asking you councillors to support this recommendation and let's move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Any other speakers? Councillor Halstead.
I thought you might have had someone against, which would have been interesting. So, yeah, look, I rise to support this.
You're up for a fight, Councillor.
Pardon?
Go on, Councillor.
No, I strongly support this. I don't think anyone will be surprised hearing me talk about being on the right track with the Aboriginal cause. I mean, they are the original people. And I say that very sincerely. I think anyone sitting here that doesn't acknowledge that really don't know what they're on about. What I want to see is that the support's real, not imaginary or spurious. And from that point of view, the proposal was put forward here tonight to actually do it through the Aboriginal Council is the right one. To me, there's never been a dispute in that one. And again, in that whole process, I think input, very clearly in my mind, should only have been from the Aboriginal culture, not any other one. They are the people that know what they want and what they should get. And this, to me, is the culmination of a long period of consultation and desires of this council over probably 2 or 3 terms that I can recall, where I know that you, Mr Mayor, were involved in these issues way back in one form or another, particularly this site. So I know that, you know, the interest has been there probably from all councillors. A little bit unsure about one of them, but all councillors in the past have wanted to go down some line like this. So I'm really thankful that this is proposed, and I think the end result's right, and I have no doubt that is the authority that should be given that control. And in terms of debate over 99 years as against 30, I would find preposterous that anybody would suggest that where we've got the opportunity for 99, that they're serious about suggesting it should only be 30 years. That sends a terrible message, and I would support absolutely 100% the 99 years.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett.
When I first was elected to council, I was very impressed because the Foursquare Church site had become the Aboriginal Community Cultural Centre, and Councillor Whipper, I think, had a lot to do with that at the time. And in those days, that was community land. And it's not anymore. Now it's operational land, which is really fascinating, seeing we're thinking about giving it a 99-year lease, but yet it's capable of being sold. I've had very good relations with the Indigenous community. In fact, they've run on my ticket 3 times, Mr Mayor, and that included the ticket of Councillor Major previously. But when we look at the statistics here, the statement was made that this has had great support. Well, it hasn't. It's had a series of against it, as recently as the current one, where there's, I think, 11 submissions against it. In our pre-meeting, it was said that we might have a bit of weariness creeping into this. I think that's absolutely the case, but I think it's weariness from those who don't want this to go ahead, as well as those who do want this to go ahead. I think the 170 odd in the original petition, we were never able to discern whether they were from this district or not. That's a common complaint we use against petitions, because I asked what were the addresses and postcodes breakup. I haven't got an answer to that. When we had the final consult on the site as part of the review of the lease earlier this year, there was hardly anyone from the Indigenous community there in a broad sense. There were a few people there, a couple of aunties, but that was it. So I don't think this is as big as we think it is. I'm fascinated, Councillor Halstead, about your comments about the 99 years. I can't predict one generation, let alone 4, at this point in time. Generally speaking, this council only gives 21-year leases, but because this is not community land, we can do 99 years. Well, I don't get that. You might say this is going to be because the security of having an Aboriginal Land Council in charge of this is going to work for us. Well, I haven't seen that. I've just seen more debate and controversy in that space down on the coast. And I also know that we lost an ALC in the northern end of this area, up I think it's called Gandagara, up that way, some time ago. So they are not invincible, these Aboriginal land councils, where the 230, 240 members of that community in this community are recognised as being the custodians. I will be voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, the land may be operational, but I think it would take a very brave council to move a motion to sell the land off.
Or to put it back.
Look, I was on council when the 355 Management Committee was first established for the Aboriginal community, and Councillor Whipper was the liaison councillor. So we've both been through the journey, and it was at times a very difficult journey. And I think that we've now come to this point in time, and it's the correct way to go. And this will give it certainty, and I just believe that after the consultation that we've been through, the certainty will come through, and we'll only move forward in this area. So I'll be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Turlin.
We never owned the land. We're leasing something we never owned. They owned it before we did. They have more rights to it. They could put a foot on it if they want, and we could sell it if we wanted to. We could sell it to them for $1. This way everybody's happy. The community at large feels like they've got better property they've still got their foot on. Everybody's a little bit happy with it, but more the Aboriginal people, who are the traditional owners, are getting something that they owned anyway. I don't think there's a problem. I think we're dragging the potential argument to try and form controversy between the parties, and that's not where it should be. It should be a collusive part where we are.
Whitefellas telling you.
Councillor Scandrett.
Council Scandrett, and they aren't they, as you said, and on my ticket, they are people. They are Aboriginals. They have more rights than we have in this country.
Okay, thank you. Address the chair, please. Before you have your right of reply, yes, it's been a long journey. And one thing this does do, and I was like Councillor Halstead, 99 years lease, I didn't come at. But then if you're going to lease it, you're going to lease it. If you're going to lease it to a people with culture who have been here, as been pointed out long before us, then what's 100 years? And if it doesn't work, council owns the land. We are leasing. But what it does do, it allows council to step back. And we now step back, and we are not in any way involved in the running of the centre as such. That is their own destiny and how they run it, and in conjunction with the Aboriginal Land Council Illawarra, is up to them. So in one way it is very good for council, because as a council, as Councillor Whipper and Nelson know, and other councils, over the years we have not always had a good working relationship. It has been in some instances quite fractious. Over the last few years it has improved immensely, in my opinion, and hopefully this will give certainty to them. So I wish them all very well, wish the community, the Aboriginal community, all the very best, because it's a bit of a new direction for them. They've been used to dealing with council. They won't be now, and we'll see how it all works out. But it's back to you, Councillor Whipper.
So thank you, councillors. It's good to hear such positivity. And 20 years ago, this was a different. There would be a different emphasis on the debate around this table. But I think over that time, we've grown as a council, and our empathy and understanding of the traditional owners of this land has also increased. We do acknowledgement now, and we acknowledge the fact that this is Gundungurra land. And as I often say, when I open meetings, not only at council meetings but other meetings as well, that this land always was, always is and always will be the spiritual and the traditional land of the Gundungurra people. I think that's really important. The fact that the Illawarra Land Council covers this area has nothing to do with us, but it is the Land Council that is responsible for this area. And I think in terms of moving forward, this is an opportunity to harness those energies. If we look at the makeup of the representative committee, the people from the Wingecarribee will be certainly in the excess, and they'll have the numbers on that committee to ensure that everything that happens here at that cultural centre is a benefit for the Aboriginal people and the wider community of the Wingecarribee Shire. There are places on that committee for traditional landowners, including Arties from the Blue Mountains, the Illawarra, the Indigenous Land Use Agreement that's been set by the courts and successfully upheld through the High Court. So these are really important things. I think this is a gesture of good faith. I think it's a gesture of maturity, as was pointed out, this is and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. The fact that it's operational gives us the opportunity to extend a lease of this nature and to, through good faith, show that to Aboriginal community. Now, it's up to Aboriginal community to make this work. I know they can. I know that there are many young Aboriginal leaders coming through at the moment that have a very strong tradition, a very strong connection with culture and the ability to move towards a brighter future and put the past to rest. I think this is the opportunity that not only the Aboriginal community of the Shire want to see, it's what we all want to see, because we do really want it to work. So thank you for the support, councillors. I regretfully, if it's not unanimous, it will go through, and that's something that those individuals that don't see this as important will be on record as making a statement of that nature. But this is very significant in the life of this Shire and for the partnership and the relationship that we are continuing to develop with the local Aboriginal community.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. And again, we are having finalisation of years and months of work. And in relation to that, would you accept point 4, that the staff involved, and I know Mr Pepping has grown quite a few grey hairs out of this over the years, but the staff involved be acknowledged for their contribution in getting to this point. And you made the point, and before I put it, that we do acknowledgement for country. And I know you did it before it was adopted by council, but it was adopted by council in 2008. I know because I was the first mayor to publicly do acknowledgement of country, and Councillor Turland was there, and he's probably trying to remember one. It was when the big band was at Corbett Gardens in 2008. That weekend was the first acknowledgement of council to the Aboriginal people officially. Yes. So I put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Those against, it is being recorded as Councillor Scanders a dissenting vote. We now move on to proposed sale of shareholding Southern Phone Company Limited. I think because this has been such a beneficial to council and the community that we asked Mr Mooney if he wouldn't mind giving or Mr Paul, who might be, maybe Mr Paul, because he did the original report. Mr Paul.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the report before Council this evening is basically putting Council on notice that Council's received correspondence from the Chairman of Southern Phone back in October or early October of this year, indicating that the Board of Southern Phone has unanimously supported a proposal for the shares in Southern Phone to be sold to AGL. There are 35 councils who are shareholders of AGL, and only councils can be shareholders of Southern Phone at this point in time. So the actual recommendations that are before council are seeking council's endorsement, firstly, to give a proxy to the chairman of AGL to vote in favour of a change of the constitution of Southern Phone to allow non-councils to be a shareholder of that company. but then also for council to agree to sell its 2 shares in the company. The arrangement that we've had with Southern Phone has been very beneficial to this shire, both in terms of the telecommunication services that it's provided to this shire over the period of the last 17 years, but also in terms of the financial return to council. And as the report indicates, up until this year, council has received dividends of just over $840,000 back to this community as a result of being a shareholder in Southern Phone. The proposal that's before council is a good one. We've got advice in terms of what the value of Southern Phone is, and the offer from AGL is a generous one. And for this council would mean a cash contribution back to our community of $785,714 for the sale of our shares. There's also money held in reserves that the company has, and we'll also share in a portion of those reserves also, probably around about the $30,000 mark. This does require all 35 councils to vote in favour of this. It'll remain to be seen whether all 35 councils do. I hope they do, because in my opinion it's a good outcome for both this community and maybe presumptuous enough to say I think for all those councils' communities. So I recommend it to you.
Thank you. And Councillor Whipper was on the council when this first came, and it was a $2 investment by the council, and Mr Paul will tell you that he had to do a second report because it was such a big investment it had to come back to council. Councillor Turley.
My question to you, Mr Paul, is do we have any shares in AGL? No. What a shame. It's obviously a good move by them, and they're moving forward with a good buy to, as you reckon, combine their energy plus phone in one billing system.
Sounds good, but we don't invest in shares other than $2 ones. Councillor Scandler.
If everyone's finished, I'd like to move the motion.
Pardon?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, the recommendation is moved by Councillor Scandrett, seconded by Councillor Nelson. No debate. Put it. All in favour. Those against. Carried. Unanimously. Well done to Southern Phones, because it was an unknown company. It was just a little company down on the south coast that was trying to get local businesses to invest in a local phone company. And they did, and they succeeded, and the results in the pudding. 11.3, tender outcome, supply and delivery of pre-mixed concrete. And basically the recommendation is that no tenders were received, and the council enter into negotiations with Boral, Premix Concrete and Concrete and Holson with the intent of forming a panel. So we put the Councillor moved by Councillor Nelson, seconded by Councillor Scandrett. Put it. All in favour. Those against. Carried unanimously. 11.5 of the 11.3, 11.5. I know we've got 11.4. My page wasn't marked. 11.4, tender sale of 10 Franklin Street, Mittagong. How could I miss that?
Yes.
Somebody move goes into closed.
Well, no, I'm going to move that we defer it to the other two councils who are back on the 27th, being Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Andrews. Because that gives Mark was not going to be here until next year, but the other two will be back within 2 weeks' time.
I'll second that.
Councillor Scandrett. So you're moving deferral until the 27th?
To the other two councils.
And I'll move the recommendation, Mr Mayor, that we proceed with it now. And I do note that those two councillors who aren't here, plus Councillor Turlin, did declare some conflict of interest in this beginning of this term.
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, well, Mr Mayor, I'm not sure that either of the councillors will be back on that date either. So what do we do then? The motion is to defer until they come back. That could be 3 months' time.
So,
Yes.
okay, so it is a procedural motion. One is deferment, one is for continuation. If there any debate, Councillor Turlin
Amendment,
speaking
I know
for
it's the-
deferment?
Do you want to speak to your motion first, or I'll speak to the...
No,
It's your motion.
your motion.
So you haven't got a second, you do have a second?
Yeah, I
Okay.
second.
Yeah, look, the issue is that this is public land. And this should be as many as we can in full council to actually hear the discussions. When this recommendation was coming, the report was coming to council, nobody knew that at that stage that Councillor McLaughlin was going to be away, nor Councillor Andrews was going to be in hospital. I think it's only fair that we wait for them to come back. Nothing might change. But this has been going on for years, and I don't see why we have to panic in moving it forward just because, you know, as you said quite clearly, Councillor Nelson, if you weren't here today and one of us left the room, we wouldn't have a quorum. There's no reason why we can't wait another 2 weeks and let the other two councillors have a chance to have their view on the process too. Nothing might change, but it's only 2 weeks. It's public land. The community hasn't even been asked about it.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. Councillor Scandron?
Well, supporting the recommendation there, Mr Mayor. Look, this has been going on for 2 terms, and it could go on forever if people are sick or away or whatever. We've heard loud and clear on a number of times that the fact that the market's changing. The value that was in this at, when I came on council 7 years ago, is different to the value that's here now. And the intent of council at the time might have been, for some councillors, to be involved in that land down there in the future development. And I've always argued that's not our role. Now we've got tender interest in this. I mean, in a perfect world, I would want that held in open council. I know I haven't got the numbers for that. But I do want it dealt with and signed off today. And I do want something to happen in that at a time when we need economic development in this shire. Something happening on that land will be a positive, Mr Mayor. So let's get on with it. Let's deal with it today. Let anyone who has conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest state those, and let's get it through today, whatever that outcome is.
Thank you, Councillor.
Look, I agree, Mr Mayor. This is council land. It needs to be considered in closed committee. There's a report that allows Mr Paul to talk to it. The same recommendation can be put up then by Councillor Turlin. So this is just a political move on his behalf, I believe. So be it. But we should be talking about it in closed committee.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Whipper?
Oh, supporting the motion. Look, I agree as well. This should be discussed in closed council, but I believe it should be discussed in closed council with the majority of councillors. That's, you know, there's nothing clandestine about that. I think this is definitely the forum to have that debate in. Nothing more, nothing less. We don't have to throw aspersions around or anything, you know. It's not political unless we make it political. All we're saying is that this is something that should affect and does affect all of council. We make that decision. The more councillors that are here, the better. That's all, simple.
Thank you. Then I'll have my 2 bobs worth. I'll be supporting the amendment. There's 2 reasons. One is we have moved some very big reports tonight, which could have quite easily been argued, because I know one councillor would have probably voted against one of the reports. But we didn't. Nobody brought that up, that these are big reports. They've taken months and years to formulate, and we passed them. Now, depending on how the big one is, as Councillors Nelson and Whipper have pointed out, this should be discussed in closed. If it is discussed in closed, if it is carried, if it is defeated, and you want further discussion, and I'm not going to open the doors, but there is a rescission motion. Okay, the good old rescission motion until more people are present. That's the way to do it. If you don't like it, yeah. As if you had not thought that one through, Councillor Whipper. So in that regard, this is procedural. So I'll put the amendment first. All in favour of the amendment that it be go into closed council, please raise your hands. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson and Gare. Those against. Councillors Turlin, Whipper and Halstead, and as you know, I'm the casting vote. Then I will use to go into the negative side, that is the amendment, and declare the amendment the motion by using my casting vote. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Scandrett, yeah, everybody. Okay. So that goes into closed. 11.5, acquisition of land for proposed detention basin barrel, the same thing. Okay. Move Councillor Nelson to go into closed. This is acquisition of land for drainage purposes. Secondly, Councillor Scandrett. Put it. All in favour. Those against, carried. We move to 12.1, development applications determined from 24th September. Move Councillor Nelson, secondly Councillor Halstead before he leaves the chamber. Put it. All in favour. Against, Councillor Halstead left the chamber just before the vote. So I declare it carried. 12.2, development applications received from 24th September to end of October. Move Councillor Nelson again and secondly Councillor Turland. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour. Against, carried. 12.3, development control plan amendment, Wiseman's Road Senior Living Development. It is basically to say that be placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days. Move Councillors Whipper, secondly Councillor Nelson. Any discussion? Put it. Before I put it, do you want a brief overview from staff?
Well, it's a senior living development, everybody now from January.
Okay. All right, well basically this was rejected by council as a planning proposal next to the Pepperfield development in Wiseman's Road. The developer opposed council's decision and took it to the JRPP. The JRPP reviewed it and determined that it proceed. As such, it has gone to the planning department who have okayed it, and it's now going through the gateway process. Is that it in a nutshell? Yep. Thank you very much. You can go home now. Oh wow, he said I've been sitting here for 3 hours waiting for this. Okay, put the motion. All in favour. Against, you've got your carried. 12.4. It's a planning matter. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. 12.4, request for a refund of development fees for Robertson Men's Shed. Councillor Whipper.
I'd like to move that we reinstate the full DA modification fee of $387.12, if I have a seconder.
That is on page 123.
Yep.
So that then becomes the motion. So council being a refund of section 2. So council refund, and you will put in there being the full amount for the modification.
Yeah, which is $387.83.
So we got that. That there be the full amount of $383.83, and that it comes out of council's contingency fund. I don't think there will be any debate on that. Happy with it? Put it, all in favour? Those against, carried. So we've finished the business paper and we get into the, 12 here it is, Mr Page, haven't got it numbered. 12.5,
I'll
page
move that,
129, I think.
I'll move that, Mr Mayor.
Proposed 2020 ordinary council meeting dates for 2020, moved by councillor Scandrett, seconded councillor Whipper. Any discussion? Councillor Scandrett?
Well, Mr Mayor, here we are. This is the last year of this current council and then the beginning of the next one, which is covered by the asterisk down the bottom. I hope all councillors can put this in their diary straight away after tonight so that we have a constant turnout at these meetings so that we can make decisions with all parts of the community represented instead of leaving parts of it unrepresented. I'm not talking about people with medical or family issues.
Thank you, councillor Scandrett. Councillor Turland.
I'd just like to move a motion, we send it to Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes.
He's got it in his diary up to the 26th of August.
Carrier pigeon.
I take that as a tongue-in-cheek comment, councillor.
I think we should delete the 25th of March, Mr Mayor. I won't be there. That's my annual golf trip, sorry.
Dearie me. Okay. Any more banter about the council dates? Then I put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. Now, we move to page question with notice, Mittagong Pool. The information's the question with notice has been answered. The recommendation is the Mittagong Pool be noted. The response, move councillor.
Yes, I'm going to move that. Have a seconder?
Yes.
It's pretty straightforward. Look, this was dealt with as stated here in an information session last week, I think it was, and dealt with very well. My question came in just before that, but by the same token they may well have been underway with what they were getting ready for last week, I don't know. But it's that sort of thing I think that needs to be publicised in a brief way, but needs to go in a press release. In other words, just to follow up to what's happened. And quite frank, it's a routine thing. It's something that a gamble was taken some years ago, in a nutshell, and that was a reasonable gamble, what it was 3 or 4 years ago. These things happen. It's called normal maintenance, and the fact that the balance tank was separate to the pool is quite appropriate for that to be drawn. So I'm just suggesting that common sense to me through the dream would be some form of follow-up. I don't care if it goes in a newsletter. Maybe that's the better, the annual, the 3 months.
That has been filled. There's no more room.
Oh, well, press release.
But maybe the general manager, I spoke to Mr Summers.
Councillors, we will find a way of getting the information out to the public.
Maybe like they said, fine notes.
Okay. Do you want that included in the motion, councillor Howsett, or just leave it to...
Routinely, I think,
Yeah,
through all that.
we're getting closer to having a date for when the pool can be open, and I think that would be the point in time to provide the additional information if councillors are comfortable with that, rather than a report back to council.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so put that, all in favour... Oh, hang on, sorry, I'll have to withdraw. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, I just want to speak to that, and I think that information going out and how we're going to do a flexible membrane in there to hopefully resolve this happening again. That was a temporary liner, as we were detailed. I just want to point out there was a slight misinformation error, I should say, in the media release that went out about the opening of Barrel Pool, because we said... We said... I'm in debate,
I'll
Mr.
see the tie. I don't know whether there's a correlation.
Well, you just look back at your records and you can see that last year we were opening Barrel Pool, and this is my, I'm going to follow this through later. Last year, 13th of October, the previous year, 7th of October, 8th of October, 10th of October, and that was the opening day for Barrel Pool. And this year it was scheduled for 9th of
Councillor
November.
Scandrett.
And my point here, Mr Mayor, my point here is, yes, the people were already asking why are the pools not open. We opened this pool, it had the problem, all that sort of thing. But the question was raised with me by a number of people, why wasn't Barrel being opened in October when it was scheduled to be open 9th of 11th? So that's just one thing I want to touch on here. You touched on the maintenance in the debate.
Councillor Scandrett, we are looking at a response from staff.
And
you are deviating to a totally different area.
I'm raising with you, Mr Mayor, the fact that
Excuse me.
the pools were opening late anyway. That should be fixed.
Mr Mayor, I think Mr Paul would like an opportunity to correct the councillor's comment, and here in the open and on record. Mr Paul.
Oh, look, councillors, the truth of the matter is that the Barrel Pool was opened early for the last 2 or 3 years, I think it might be the last 3 years, because the Mittagong pool was out of action. So they're the facts. Mittagong is always the pool that opens first, followed by Barrel and then Bundanoo. Council gets a report each year that sets the pool season, the fees and charges, and any special arrangements with swim clubs and water polo, etc. So Council has adopted, as a resolution, the opening date of the Barrel Pool for the 9th of November. We opened on the
30th of October.
Yes, so 8 or 9 days prior to that date that Council had adopted by resolution. So our press release is 100% correct. We've opened the Barrel Pool early.
Thank you. I put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. We move on to 17.2, question with notice. Council, compulsory acquisition, resumption of private land, asked by Councillor Turland. The questions have been answered, and it is recommended that the Council's compulsory acquisition be noted.
Yeah, well, I suppose, the reason why I keep bringing it up is to do with
Councillor
Reeky's
Turner.
Corner. And it says in the DA that, and it says here in the report, development applications via development dedication. But there has been no offer to buy that corner. There's been no offer to buy the corner.
What are we referring to?
This is in relation to this request here for information in relation to what's called just term compensation. In other words, if council wants a bit of land, they say I can have it in these 3 methods. One is mutual negotiation, compulsory acquisition, or through the development application process. And the reason why I ask this is I've tried to explain to you, it gets back to the Reeky's Corner. In the DA, it is not a separate matter. In the DA,
Councillor
I've
Turland,
made it quite clear. Well, I want to know what has been the fair compensation for Reeky's. Not a razoo.
Then, Councillor Turland, can I suggest that rather than just ask, you asked a generic question, this is the generic question. If it is specific, then you ask specific, because there is an answer for that. And I don't know whether that is or should be discussed in open. I'll take guidance from staff on this, because there was knowledge of this.
And I brought it up.
Yeah, but it was also brought up by staff. Through you, Madam General Manager.
It's a development consent issue, but what I'm trying to say is here, it clearly says here that the council, all councils are required under the Lands Act to acquire through the just terms compensation. That has not happened. It has not happened. I will bring it up again and again and again until I get an answer.
Look, you're raising points that are not on the agenda as such.
Well,
you've had a question, it's been answered, and now there is this, example being given I don't know whether staff can talk about it, because I'm happy enough for it to be spoken about, but I don't know whether this is the right place.
I'll support the
No,
recommendation.
yes.
If you put 2 as a report come back on Riki's. End of story. There you go. Deal with it that way.
Very specific question.
Councillor, if I may, Mr Mayor?
Yes, I'm going to. Please resume your seat. Madam General Manager.
The question was generic. It's been answered generically. So there's only one thing to do, and that is for the answer to be noted. If Councillor Turland has an issue with a specific matter, the best way to deal with it, Councillor, is to bring it up as a notice of motion, and then councillors can debate it. Because without, this is just too generic for there to be a proper debate.
Why can't I just put it in there and get rid of the noting, and I want a report brought back in relation to the fair compensation paid to Riki's in relation to compulsory acquisition.
You could move that motion, Councillor.
That's right, I can remove that section there, and I can add to that section where it says that.
Well, make it number 2.
Well, I don't want to just note, because that means nothing.
No.
To add point 2.
And you add point 2.
Okay, that.
Yep.
That a report, I'll give you the DA number, comes back on DA number 17/0816. .09, I think that's what it is. I'll confirm that in a minute anyway.
In relation to?
In relation to, I don't know what they call it, is it Riki or Riki's tyre service development application on the development and on
The corner of Funkston and
Station Street.
Station Street.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
I think that is adequate. I do not think
Okay.
that cannot be chased through.
Well, in specific, it is clause 14, which relates to the displayed corner in the DA.
So is that a condition?
That's the condition of the DA.
Did you refer to that?
I did, but it's basically one condition.
All right.
Okay, that's fine.
Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, when I read that, it was a generic question, it's a generic answer. The fact that it's now being qualified as an individual, and that's fine. But I think what Councillor Turland was initially trying to seek is the answer that's probably there. In other words, is there a policy, blah, blah, blah. The answers are yes, and this is what we do, all in accordance with the law. But of course then there is a specific one, which I think is appropriate. You've now put that on there. But in terms of what you put there, I think the answer was correct, generically.
All right, put the recommendation subject to that change or addition. All in favour? Against? Carried. Move on to 17.3, question with notice 2019 signage and outdoor advertisement. Raised by Councillor Turland in relation to permissibility of digital signage. And the message, it has been answered, and the recommendation is on page 137. Moving.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to...
You're moving the...
Well, the recommendation to be noted, but I want to add another 2 to it if we can.
Yep.
And I've got a question to staff in a minute. It says in the bottom here in the answers that council staff review the policy. Well, I want a date and a time when that might be. More than likely early next year now, because they're running out of time this year.
Yeah.
It'll be 2020.
Yeah, but I don't want it to drag into September 2020.
Yeah,
Sorry?
I'll support that as soon as possible in the new year.
Okay, we can have that in there.
We're trying to focus on the strategic planning statements and the housing strategy.
Well, it's not a housing strategy issue.
No, I know, but we've only got 2 staff members that are doing both of those, and they've got to get those done by the 30th of June.
Well, you were talking this will be after the 30th of June?
If we can get more staff resources by the 30th of June.
Okay, and can I just ask one question to staff before I move further on this? Which overrules the issue in relation to digital signs? Is it the DCP or SEP 64 of the Act? SEP 64 overrules the DCP because it's law?
Mr. Pepping.
Through the General Manager, SEP 64, where there is inconsistencies, would supersede the Development Control Plan, but SEP 64 only is applied in certain circumstances as defined under the SEP. So it's usually along major roads or in prime locations, etc. So it is defined. All other areas come under Council's local controls.
I understand that, and I've got that pretty clearly, and we've highlighted points in here. But when you read the DCP at the moment, you go, the applicant should consult the following documents to determine if the signage they propose is permitted where council consent is required.
Correct. Yep.
And the second statement is the LEP, number one, which is law, and then SEP 64.
Yes.
But it doesn't mention in there, from what I can quickly see, the Development Control Plan.
So through the Chair, if SEP 64 applies, it's only SEP 64 applies. If the LEP applies, then you also go to the Development Control Plan.
But you just confirmed that the the SEP 64 overrules the Development Control Plan.
No,
In certain
it supersedes. If the SEP doesn't apply to that particular location, it's the local environmental plan and the DCP. But a state environmental planning policy does not call on the DCP or Development Control Plan to give governance to that control. Okay. They don't recognise development control plans.
Yep, I understand. I get that. Where we've got at the moment is because it's not specific to any site, but SEP 64, the aims of the policy are to ensure that signage included in the advertised it is compatible with the desired amenity and vision of the character, provides efficiency and communication at the suitable location, a high quality design and finish, which things are, to regulate signage but not the content.
Councillor Turland.
I'm just reinforcing what the SEP is.
Yeah, but what is the purpose?
Well, so at the moment, what we have got is from what I can see, except for one point, is the location in relation to signage in our shire. There's a discrepancy which needs to be determined. Now, we're going to have a briefing on it, but I wasn't quite clear under the aims of the policy would overrule, what I'm trying to get at, overrules the DCP, and it does, except for, you just mentioned it, the location.
Again, the state environmental planning policy defines the locations that the state environmental planning policy applies to, which is usually regional roads, state roads, prime locations. So a sign that is facing into a car park would not come under the SEP. It comes under our local environmental plan and our development control plan.
Okay.
We are getting a little bit complicated here with the question.
Exactly.
I think the big thing is that you want, and I'll support it because I think there have, as we know, communications move on and times move on, and we should probably have a look at it. Councillor Scandra.
Yes, I'm going to second this, and I'm going to suggest we add the following to what Councillor Turland's already talked about. That is that we aim, that the council agree we have an aim to develop information sheets after this report.
Oh,
No, just hear me out, please, Mr. Mayor.
Not me hearing you out. I'm asking Councillor Turland whether he will have included.
And I'll tell you why, because then people such as the ones that I think Councillor Turner is talking about, we're driving around today on our inspections, and last week there are numerous infringements technically, but there's no clarification. So I welcome this. That's why I'm seconding it. Right? We need a signage code update, and we need information sheets. So I'm suggesting that we plan to develop information sheets.
I think it's the briefing session.
That gives some comfort to people.
There is a signage policy that people are able to view and get a hard copy if they wish, and that is what we are working on at the moment. Until that is reviewed, that is the signage policy. So no good talking about, you know, a one-page flyer or something like that. Okay, well, let's do the report first, eh? And then we worry about the secondary. So you've moved, Councillor Turler moved it, you've seconded, and we put it all in favour, against, carried. Talk about a long way to break a kernel. 18.1, notices of motion.
Question 138. 138.
It is, no. Infrastructure inspections. A question by Councillor Halstead in relation to infrastructure inspections, and the response by council staff. Councillor Halstead.
I'm going to move what's there plus number 2, and I'll explain why in a moment. And number 2 is that council develop a regime of regular inspections of road infrastructure throughout the Shire. That's a regular, regimented process, which is not the subject of that report, and I think Barry Paul's well aware of that. Having said that, I'm not unhappy with the report, but it's not what I'm looking for. I think that certain things have been done. So can I continue on?
Yeah.
Good, because...
Well, but now, okay, you've got a second.
You've got a second yet for that?
Councillor
Pretty
Whipper.
straightforward. This is the most important issue from a legal point of view that has ever been brought down on local government or road authorities full stop, which is all local government councils in this country, which relates to the abolition of what was called the highway rule, or non-feasance. In other words, councils can no longer rely on roads just degrading and saying, oh, we're not going to do anything with it. This is the theory, or what was happening before. Councils weren't held responsible under the non-feasance rule, which was abolished in this High Court case in 2001. I think Barry Paul's onto it. I'm not too sure there, but like I said, I'm not going to be critical of what's written there, but I really think we need to be careful as a council, because councils throughout the state have done the right thing, well, most of them, and you've got to have these regular inspections. Don't have any problem with those that are being done from time to time, because that's what they are. From time to time, when seen fit, certain things people see and they report on it. So what I'm suggesting here is that this should be regimented. Now, whether it be once a year, twice a year, and there's a difference, obviously, in terms of certain things you do once a year, some you do twice. This is so important, it's not funny. I'm not going to sit here as a councillor and be part of a council that's really paid little, if any, attention to that case. I mean, clearly it was a double-barrel case, one with Brody and the other one was Gantos, which they lost. But this is so damn important, it's not funny. So, of course, councillors at the moment can only be held responsible for one of two things: misfeasance or malfeasance. In other words, you've repaired it in an honest way, but it's failed, or you've gone out there and intentionally not repaired it properly, and that's the malfeasance. So all I'm trying to do is get on top of this, because it's a huge issue. Now, I'm hoping you understand it. I think you do. I think you do. Well, there's a whole lot of us sitting around here are liable. And we're talking about millions of dollars payouts if it happens. And if you want to know what they are, I'll put you onto the Marshall case. Have a read of it sometime and just see what can happen to a council, as in it disappears off the face of the earth as a result of malpractice, if you like, or what would today be determined malfeasance. So all I'm suggesting is, I'm happy to come in and help you out. I'm not here to hinder you, I'm here to help you, right? I don't deliver this stuff 5 times or 6 times a year as a joke, right? So I'm telling you that I know a bit about this one, and you can avail yourself of it if you like, or if not, don't. But I'd suggest it's smart if you do. So that's what I'm suggesting from that. I'm happy to come sit down some stage with Barry and say this is the sort of thing that should be done. You're part way there, but I'm not too sure you'd stand up in court, irrespective of the case that's been quoted. I can see where they're trying to get at too. But that's what's behind what I'm on about. I want to protect these, or the ratepayers of this Shire, from what can be massive claims against it as a result of either misfeasance or malfeasance. That's all. Straightforward.
All right, you got a bit of passion in that one, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I totally support this, Mr Mayor. And in view of what we've heard today, particularly from Jan Edwards about where the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee is going, she had noted that they're identifying one of our probably prime risks is IT and so on, and I know we've got somebody very good looking at all that and has the confidence of the council. But I agree with Councillor Halstead. This is an area we've got to get into, and I would dare to suggest we've also got to do public halls and public spaces, including this chamber here, because it doesn't comply with theatre and public halls. I mean, we've got to have a risk regime in place that we can back up if something comes at us. So yes, I'll be supporting this, and I'd love to see theatres and public halls added to it.
No, it won't be this one. I'll tell you why it won't be.
Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, because this case relates to infrastructure within roads only. That's the conundrum we're in. You might want to extend that at a later date under some other legislation. This is Australia-wide. This is the High Court made these decisions. So it's nothing to do with halls, it's roads only.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see how that all pans out with Councillor Halstead being prepared to give comment. So I put the recommendation as moved by Councillor Halstead and seconded Councillor Scandrett. I think that was Whipper. Whipper it was too. Put it, all in favour, against, carried. 18.1, notice of motion, Mooloolaba road development application. Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, look, the reason why I brought this notice of motion up is that... Sorry? Yeah. Obviously today we've actually, well, I've got this document today, been given to me on the 1st of November, which relates to the court, the Land Environment Court Class 4 criminal case in relation to a fence and a boundary. Now, this has nothing to do with the... Sorry. This has nothing to do in relation to the two owners. This is actually to try and work out what's happened with the process to where we've got here today. And if you look at all the documents, you can go straight back. And I'm not trying to side on any property side of it. It's quite clear. If you go back to the DA on the plan, it clearly says replace fence on two sides of the boundary as per item 57, which clearly says it'll comply with the DCP. That's fine. That's good. So that was approved. And then you go back through the process and you find out that in 2016, one of the objectors, the neighbour, wrote to council, got a letter back from council's contract at the time that said that a request that a privacy fence should be put up, which would mean it's a higher fence than just a wire fence. So then we go off to the court situation where we end up going to the court with the applicant, which is a bit of a shame because when you go through the documents, you see actually that the application to the court, the DA doesn't mention lap and cap.
To the chair,
The DA doesn't mention lap or cap or anything else, but in the application to the local court or the notice of order 11 to the owners of the property, it says they'll do a lap and cap fence for adequate privacy. So privacy was obviously the idea of the process all the way through. But the problem is it's all been lost in the process because then we took it to the court. Sorry, no, the applicant took us to the Land and Environment Court challenging the local court order and they won it. It was never going to be, it should never have been a criminal case. It should have always been...
No. It just happens to be in the court.
I understand that, but it's not nice having your name listed in the court as a criminal when it shouldn't be there as a criminal. This was a dispute between two owners which related to an issue of the DA that wasn't black and white, that was in the first instance put forward. So the issue here, this is just not... This request here is one of multiple I could put up for requests to be reviewed because we are all make mistakes. But to keep empowering the same mistake and trying to put it to a point of where it wasn't clear, which cost the community money, is not good enough. It's not good enough, because that's what happens again and again. Somebody, put your hand up, we made a mistake. But what's happened, the two parties have been dragged through the process for no real reason, but as simple as, we didn't put it in the DA. It wasn't written in the DA. It was assumed it was going to be. And all it's done is aggravate the two neighbours to the point, but one neighbour was smart enough or keen enough to challenge it in the Land Environment Court and now got a cost order against us because we didn't do our documents properly. It's the same as Hopewood, Mary Street, Hurlingham Avenue. There's three that I've put forward to you now. You know, those I could keep going with a lot more. Now, all I'm trying to say is that the process who is vetting and looking at all the processes in the DA through its process? Not the brand new greenfield sites. This is one that highlights when somebody fails in the system, it affects two parties. But it's cost both parties lots of money and angst, which shouldn't have been. It should have been black and white. A fence go up, done and dusted, finished, wouldn't have been a problem. Would have reduced a lot of the angst to date. So this has gone on since 2016. It's got to stop somewhere. Council could have built the fence 5 times for what it spent in time and effort in the court and the process today.
I'll correct you there, Councillor
Okay,
Turley.
a number of times.
No, I won't even agree with once.
I won't retract it, because when we find out what the court tells us we've got to pay for the costs against us, and the costs that council spent to date, and the local court, and all the council's time and staff
I
and
can
effort,
tell
it
you
will be a lot of money.
it is not a huge amount, but I take your point, and I won't get into public debate here. It is not the time or place.
So, Mr Mayor, procedurally, I'm happy to second that motion so that councillor...
Can have finish his time summing up.
Well, I've had a few interviews. Have you stopped and started the clock?
Yeah, I think the bill was...
Okay, look, the issue is, this is just to try and refine the process so this doesn't happen again for other people. We should never have gone to the court. It should have been resolved a lot earlier. And, you know, is it staff too busy? If not, we haven't got staff. This was a simple DA that should have been picked up. It was requested in one of the contractors to put a fence up. It didn't get into the system, and then it's caused the angst right through. So the quickest thing here is to resolve it. And it is not a Dividing Fences Act problem, because it's in the DA. It's in the DA, and then the poor owners that own the property, they couldn't put a fence up.
Okay, I'm not going to support it. What I will support, because there is obviously clarifications that councillors need to know. And the expending of public monies in relation to this, which is going to run into you talking about dollars, Councillor Tullen, there is going to be multiple tens of thousands of dollars if this motion goes through. What I will suggest, and I have asked staff as close as yesterday to define an answer in relation to this, because I've been involved as well, as I think virtually every councillor has around the table. I would support, for councillors' knowledge, that council have a briefing session on this to try and put it to bed forever. But dragging in who are we going to have? Solicitors and accredited certifiers and qualified town planners. I mean, this is talk about cracking a walnut with a 10-pound sledgehammer or a 20-pound sledgehammer. I just can't support it, but I will support, for the clarity, so everybody is on the same page, and you've made the comment that maybe things haven't been done, a briefing session where you can raise those questions with staff and get the definitive answer. If you're not happy then take the next step. But the first step...
Okay, we'll put it to a briefing session.
As soon as practicable,
going on
this
since
one,
2016 now.
this is involving council staff's time that has been taken up on this is extraordinary, as is mine,
Let alone the cost of the community.
and the cost of the community. So, you know, let's not spend money unnecessarily. If you're not happy, then take it, go the next step, but get the definitive first. So I don't know if we've got 2 more meetings left. I don't know whether we'll be able to get it in, but Councillor Nelson.
Well, Mr Mayor, I actually asked a question about this matter at the last legal reports that came to council, and the advice was that there'd be additional information the next time the legal reports come up, which I think is probably the next council meeting. So this can be discussed in closed committee at the next council meeting. There'll be additional information provided.
Okay,
So,
you're happy with that, Councillor Turlin, that...
Have a briefing.
Right, okay. Now, we'll try and tie it in the next 2 weeks, that it may involve you coming in at 8:30, or whatever, and try and get this resolved, because it is taking up too much time. So,
You
got the
mentioned about too
right
much.
advice.
You mentioned too much time, but this is people's lives, for God's sake.
I
they
know
pay a fee, and they just want respect.
I know,
And you
Councillor
just
Turlin,
can't-
I don't disagree,
Well-
but there are 2 stories here. And
No,
I
there's
think,
one story. It's council's story. Nothing
no,
to do with the neighbours. I don't want to know about the neighbours.
I've got 2 stories.
I don't want to know about the neighbours. I want to know.
Yeah, Councillor Scandrett, I will agree. Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Notice the motion, Council Strategic Planning Day. Councillor Turland,
It's quite simple.
18.2.
Quite simple. All I'm requesting is the Mayor do, as other council staff members, actually present a report to us. And we have different members of council provide different stories and different reports to us all the time. I'm asking the General Manager to provide exactly what it says, 15 minutes prior to.
Well, I don't know whether I will allow, I think I'll be writing a letter to the General Manager requesting her that she refrain if this is carried. I'll tell you why. I think it is fraught with danger in relation to and Councillor Halstead may remember this previous General Manager who decided that he'd give his vision for the Shire back in about 1997, I think. And he was absolutely hammered by councillors, by members of the public. How dare you have elected representatives to give vision for the Shire, not the General Manager. I ask you to reconsider this because it's fraught with problems. It will embarrass the General Manager because whatever she says is not going to be agreed to by universally.
But that's the same with the councillors. Whatever we come up with,
Yes, you may.
we cop the same thing.
Well, we're
Because
the
it's up
elected
to the council or
representative.
staff to implement what comes to us. I don't think there's a problem with, we have different staff members providing different reports in open council on the camera. There's no different than General Manager providing
Okay.
something. Now, it was quite clear in our briefing sessions today, made when Councillor Scandrett and the General Manager were having words, and you said, councillors, we employ one person. You employ the others. I'm asking the person as a councillor that represents the community for the one person we employ to provide the information, the vision that we give to you, you give it back to the public. Because it's us that are copying it in the street when things don't get implemented as our so-called goals and platforms. That's the issue.
Okay, hang on. Well, I'm going to stop you there because you have a motion. I am suggesting very strongly that you withdraw it, because I just don't think it's fair. But the GM wants to say something, but I'll ask for somebody to second.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll second it.
Okay, then it's seconded by Councillor Scandrett. Before you speak, I am going to rule that the General Manager be allowed to make a comment. GM.
Now, councillors, I would just like to advise you that I referred this question to the Office of Local Government. The response from the Office of Local Government is that it is not the role of the General Manager to provide a vision for the council. Councillors, I'm not standing for council, so I can't give a vision for what the council in the future might want to prioritise. Council already has a vision. It's called the Community Strategic Plan. It was put in place quite a while ago, and then it was revalidated 4 or 5 years ago through further community consultation. What any council, or each council, once it is elected, decides to prioritise from that community strategic plan is determined by the councillors once elected. Councillors, you will remember that after your election, there was a strategic planning day held. Councillors elected were asked individually for their priorities, and then the other councillors provided their view as to whether or not they supported that. That is how the vision and the direction for the council is determined once a council is elected. If this resolution goes ahead, councillors, all I will speak to is the process. And I can't speak about anything else. And that's the advice I've been given by the Office of Local Government.
Councillor Scandrett.
Procedural question, just first. When is your next review due, as per the process?
I have an interim review with the review panel on the 22nd of November, and we will then set the annual review date, which is probably going to be sometime in July.
And I agree with you, Madam GM. We had a strategic planning day. In fact, we have one every November to refine the vision. I agree with the thrust of what Councillor Turner is looking at here. I mean, the last strategic planning day on the 6th of November, to me, was half a day of damage control and the rest was strategic, but that is how I just saw it. But going forward, I think there are a lot of questions being asked in the community. I'm certainly getting a lot, all the time, about what's going on, why aren't we doing this, why aren't we doing that, and also asking about the various problems that are out there in terms of project delivery. So, yes, that interim review that you're talking about for your position review later this month, okay, that's good. I'm going to leave my seconding in place here because I think what Councillor Turland is trying to achieve, which is a discussion about connecting with the community and being able to give them answers, stands on its own.
The words are strategy and vision, not about anything else.
No,
okay. All right. So you want your right of reply.
Yeah. After Council's strategy planning day of the 6th, we have the information. We have the information. It's to do with that strategy plan. Where this notice of motion lets myself down, where it says on her strategy, where it should say on council's strategy. One word, her and council. Sorry about the her, should have been Lady GM, but that's where I've let down. It relates to what we did on the 6th. The public, there were some good things that were put on the 6th, and there were some disaster things on the 6th. But this is just for them, for the representative of the council, the person that the community relies upon, which is paying everybody's wage, and us as councillors. I'm asking the General Manager to give a review on what was put together on the 6th. That's what it says, the strategy day. I shouldn't have been her vision, it should have been council's vision. All those documents and was presented to us on the 6th last Wednesday. None of us have copies of them. It was all a PowerPoint presentation. It's all there. It'd be nice for the public to know what we actually did, sitting around having coffee and tea and cake. No, it wasn't. We went through a lot of issues. But the public need to know that. Not just us. That's the reason for this. It is not, I shouldn't have written her view. It should have been council's view, which is what it says. The 6th. It's quite clear.
Completely different.
It's a completely different count.
It's written there.
You can't change a...
After the council strategy planning of the 6th, it is written there.
Councillor Turland, I don't know where this came from.
Me. I wrote it.
Well, you know, we have as the GM has just said, we have the annual report, we have reports to council ad infinitum, strategy and vision. I think it's... Anyway, I'm not supporting it. I think it is, you haven't done it properly.
Well, I think I have done it properly. The community need to know what we did on the 6th, what was put to the community, to us as councillors, good, bad or indifferent. As I said, every other council staff member here provides reports to councillors. I'm asking the General Manager to wrap up in one pile from what happened on the 6th and actually give that report a degree of comfort and confidence to the community that we've got it under control as council staff and councillors. At the moment...
that is not the way it's worded.
Look, it's not the way it's worded, but I must admit, when I read it, that's the way I took it. It meant that. So I think that you should amend that to say the councils, and then to me there's no issue. It's reporting about what happened on that day, and quite frankly there's a lot of good things happening on that day.
Yeah.
You are entitled to have a vision, by the way.
How do I do that in 15 minutes?
Well, I don't know. I think I'd be happy with 15 minutes rather than an hour, to be honest with you, doing it like it. But anyway, it's about what happened on that day. That's what he's on about.
Well, then I am going. If that be the case, I'm ruling it out of order, because it is totally not what is printed. It is, your presentation has totally changed from when the first set. I am ruling it out of order on what you've said. It is not correct. Everybody's spoken. I am ruling it out of order.
Put it to the vote. Yes.
I'm putting it to vote that it be out of order.
Okay, you can do that. Put it to the vote. I've changed it to council strategy meeting, not hers.
Well, you can't keep changing a motion on the run, councillor. I'm sorry. I'm ruling it out of order, and I'm not. You can challenge my rule.
If I may, the day on the 6th had nothing to do with the 2024 council.
I'm ruling it out of order, and I'm not taking your challenge against me. You can. I am making a ruling that it is out of order in relation to the presentations.
No, I'm trying to type down. Mr. Mayor, motion, you are...
I am moving...
Could we just clarify procedure?
Okay, I put it to the vote that the motion is out of order. All in favour of the motion that it is out of order? Yeah, I've ruled it out of order.
Mr. Mayor, we're now doing the motion of dissent, moved by me, seconded, I think, by councillor Turl, right? Okay, and that the motion, the original motion, decision be revisited, right?
Okay. I've ruled it out of order.
We're putting the motion back.
I close this section of the meeting.
Resubmitting the motion.
I am closing this section of the meeting and moving into closed committee. Somebody move that we move into close.
Point of order. Point of order. You've got to deal with this motion of dissent.
You have to put it to the...
You have to deal with this motion of dissent.
Excuse me. Can I get a ruling? Mr. Paul.
Well, you need a second to the motion of dissent.
He's got that. Councillor Turland. Councillor Turland.
Okay, I am moving that it be put, right, in relation to the recommendation. I've ruled the recommendation out of order. I put that, and you're putting a ruling of dissent.
I am.
Okay.
And that means that motion
You
will
two
come back
debate
to, that will come back to this meeting.
I have finished debating it.
Not necessarily, not if it gets up, not if it doesn't get up.
All right?
Well,
So all
that's
in
what I said.
favour of the motion of dissent, please raise your hand.
You guys are good.
Okay.
Not as good as you, councillor.
No. Put your, don't say you couldn't put your hand up.
Okay.
Overruled your dissent, so now you have to put the motion.
Yeah, so now I put the motion.
Yes, before, and obviously the correction is before it's obviously at the next meeting. It says that after the council's strategic planning. So it's the next meeting.
Excuse me.
Possibly changing the, it's 20.
You can't, Councillor Turlin, you can't keep changing
Okay, well, let it
a
run. Let
recommendation
it
when
run
this
at the
hasn't
27th.
even
Let
been
it
finished.
run at the
Let it
27th.
as it is, I was going to
Okay.
change the
So
20.
all in
those in
favour
favour?
of the motion of dissent, it has been
It's up.
a for.
So we're now gonna
Those
put the motion.
against,
Yeah, me.
so there's 2 against on the ruling.
I got that.
So now I put the motion.
The original motion, as there, on the screen. All in favour?
We're talking about the one that's got the wrong word in it, haven't we?
Yes.
It's now got the right word.
They've changed it to council.
Oh, as
what's
long as
the-
it's changed to council.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
I'll go
it.
with that one. That's-
Those
Three.
against. I'll use my casting vote to rule it out of order. Declare the meeting closed and ask somebody to move that we go into closed. Move Councillor Nelson, seconded Councillor Whipper, that we go into closed.
I just wanted to notice the motion.